Route 66 cut through Millard Creek like a faded scar past storefronts. Frozen in the 1970s in gas stations where attendants still checked your oil, Frank Reynolds, Desert Storm veteran turned classic car mechanic, found peace. Here his life is meticulously ordered as his toolbox. Until a storm-soaked woman and child appeared at his garage door, her face bruised a silver-oiled derrick pendant at her neck that connected to whispers of corporate poisonings and deadly secrets from the Texas oil boom. As Frank offered shelter, he couldn't know he'd just stepped into a war between wealth and justice with a small-town mechanic about to face the fight of his life. Rain hammered against the metal roof of Reynolds' classic auto, drowning out the classic rock playing softly from an old Panasonic radio Frank Reynolds had owned since Desert Storm. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision over the engine of a cherry-red 1967 Mustang Fastback, the kind of American muscle that had defined an era. Outside Texas, storm clouds had turned day to night, but Frank barely noticed. At 55, he found peace in the rhythm of wrenches on metal, in the honest work of fixing what others had broken. The garage sat on a forgotten stretch of what had once been Route 66 just outside Dallas, where urban sprawl gave way to open country. A relic of another time like Frank himself. 20 years running this place after 8 years in the Army. A lifetime of oil changes, rebuilding transmissions, and restoring classics for men who remembered when American cars ruled the world. "What do you think, Sarge?" Frank asked the aging German shepherd lounging on a worn blanket near the office door. The dog's ears perked up at his name, but he made no move to abandon his comfortable spot. "Yeah, she's almost ready, Mr. Patterson's gonna lose his mind when he sees her." Frank straightened, wincing at the twinge in his lower back, a souvenir from a tank recovery operation near Basra in '91. The wall clock advertising champion spark plugs from 1973 showed nearly midnight. Time to call it a day. Just as he reached for the shop rag to wipe his hands, he heard a faint tapping at the rear door, barely audible over the thunderstorm. Sarge heard it too, rising with surprising alertness for his 12 years. The dog's posture changed, not aggressive, but attentive. "Easy boy," Frank murmured, reaching for the heavy mag light he kept nearby, a habit from his military days. Always have a light, always have a weapon. Sometimes they could be the same thing. The tapping came again, more urgent this time. Frank moved carefully toward the back entrance, Sarge at his heel. Through the rain-streaked window, he could make out two figures huddled beneath the security light, a woman and a small child, both drenched and shivering. Frank hesitated only a moment before unlocking the door. The storm wind pushed it open, bringing with it the scent of rain and something else, fear. "Please," the woman said, her voice cultured despite her bedraggled appearance. "We just need shelter until the storm passes." The security light illuminated her face, elegant features marred by a dark bruise blooming across her left cheekbone. Her clothes, though soaked, were expensive, the kind Frank saw on women shopping in Highland Park, not stumbling into rural auto shops at midnight. The boy, no more than 7, clutched her hand with white knuckles, his perfect posture and watchful eyes at odds with his age. "Come in," Frank said, stepping aside. 25 years ago in Kuwait, he'd learned to recognize the look of people running from something worse than a storm. "I've got coffee inside." The woman hesitated, clearly weighing unknown dangers against the storm and whatever had put that bruise on her face. The boy looked up at her, then at Frank, assessing with unnerving maturity. "Thank you," she finally said, stepping inside with dignity that seemed out of place against her disheveled appearance. Frank led them into the office, a small space with a worn leather couch, filing cabinets, covered with faded racing decals and walls lined with vintage, automotive ads, and military memorabilia. A small TV in the corner played muted late-night news. "I'm Frank Reynolds," he said, switching on the ancient coffee maker. "This is Sarge." The dog approached the boy, cautiously sniffing. To Frank's surprise, the child held out a steady hand for the German shepherd to inspect, displaying none of the fear most kids showed around a dog Sarge's size. "I'm Sophia," the woman said after a moment. "This is my son, Nathan." She didn't offer a last name, and Frank didn't ask. Some questions were better left unasked. "Coffee will be ready in a minute. Bathroom's through there if you want to dry off." Frank pulled a clean shop jacket from a hook. "It's not fancy, but it's dry." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds." The formal address came naturally to her, reinforcing Frank's impression of old money and finishing schools. While Sophia took Nathan to the bathroom, Frank checked the blinds and locked the front entrance. Standard procedure, that's what he told himself. But years of training had taught him to recognize threats, and something about these two set off warning bells he hadn't heard in decades. When they returned, the boy's hair was neatly combed despite being wet, and Sophia had done what she could to make herself presentable. She'd wiped away some makeup, revealing more bruising than had initially been visible. Frank pretended not to notice, handing her a chipped mug of coffee. Sugar's on the desk. Got some hot chocolate for the boy if he wants it. Nathan looked to his mother, who nodded permission. Thank you, sir, he said, voice soft but pronunciation perfect. As they settled, Frank caught sight of matching silver pendants around their necks, an oiled derrick design with Latin words curving beneath. Sophia tucked hers away when she noticed his glance. Storm's supposed to last all night, Frank said, keeping his tone casual. I've got an apartment upstairs. Spare room's nothing special, but you're welcome to it. The way Sophia's shoulders tensed, then relaxed, told Frank volumes about the calculation happening behind her eyes, weighing his offer against alternatives that must have seemed worse. That's very kind, she finally said. Just for tonight until we can arrange transportation. Frank nodded, not pushing. The TV caught his attention, a report about Arlington Oil's stock surge following new offshore drilling approvals. The camera panned across a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit, Victor Arlington's CEO, according to the caption. Frank noticed both Sophia and Nathan go completely still, the boy unconsciously touching his pendant. Interesting. You folks hungry? Got some leftovers I can heat up. Nathan's eyes brightened slightly at the mention of food, a normal child's reaction breaking through his carefully controlled demeanor. Upstairs, Frank's apartment reflected the man himself, sparse, functional, with military precision evident in its organization. The living room housed a modest television, a leather recliner worn smooth at the armrests, and bookshelves filled with military history, classic car manuals, and Louis L'Amour paperbacks. A shadow box displayed service medals Frank never mentioned, and photos of a younger version of himself in desert fatigues alongside fellow soldiers. One photo held prominence, Frank with a smiling brunette woman beside a 1970s Chevelle SS. Janet, his wife of 15 years, lost to cancer a decade ago. The spare room's through there, Frank said, showing them down a short hallway. Bathrooms across, towels in the cabinet. This is very generous, Sophia said, her exhaustion beginning to show through her composed facade. Get some rest. We'll figure things out in the morning. After settling them in, Frank returned downstairs, Sarge following loyally. Instead of heading straight home, he methodically checked each entrance, testing locks, and peering out at the rain-drenched parking lot. Nothing seemed amiss, but the familiar tightness in his chest, the combat awareness he'd lived with for years, had returned. At the workbench, he pulled out a small notebook and wrote down what he knew: woman and child running from something. Expensive clothes education. Bruises consistent with domestic violence. Reaction to Arlington Oil news segment. Frank had never been one to involve himself in other people's problems. After the war, after Janet, he'd built a life of careful routine and limited connections. But those bruises on Sophia's face, the too adult watchfulness in Nathan's eyes, they awakened something he'd thought long dormant. Sarge whined softly, sensing his master's unease. Yeah, I know, boy. We're getting involved where we shouldn't. Frank scratched the dog's ears. But some things you can't just walk away from. He glanced at the wall where his service photo hung beside his father's. From Vietnam, both men standing tall in uniforms that represented duty and protection. The Reynolds men had always lived by a code: you stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That night, Frank slept lightly in his recliner, Sarge alert at his feet as the storm raged outside, and new complications settled into his carefully ordered life. Morning brought clear skies and the familiar sounds of Route 66 waking up trucks downshifting on the highway. The clatter from Rosie's diner next door, old Mr. Martinez opening his service station across the street. Frank had been up since dawn, brewing coffee and checking the perimeter of his property with casual precision that belied its purpose. No unusual vehicles, no signs of anyone watching the place. Not yet, anyway. Upstairs, he heard movement, light footsteps trying to be silent. Frank smiled slightly. The boy moved like someone used to avoiding attention, but the old floorboards gave him away. Morning, Frank said, when Nathan appeared at the kitchen doorway, still in yesterday's clothes but meticulously straightened. Your mom's still sleeping. Nathan nodded, eyeing the room with that same careful assessment. She doesn't sleep well usually. A slip of information immediately followed by a wary look, as if he'd said too much. Hungry, I make a decent breakfast. Frank gestured to the fridge. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you going. While Frank prepared eggs and toast, Nathan wandered to the living room window, peering out with caution rather than curiosity. Not the behavior of a typical 7-year-old. You like cars, Nathan? Frank asked, keeping his voice casual. The boy's posture relaxed slightly. Yes, sir. Father has 20 classic cars, but we're not allowed to touch them. Father, huh? Not dad or daddy. Another piece of the puzzle. Well, I'm restoring a 63 Corvette Stingray downstairs. Split window 327 cubic inch V8. After breakfast, maybe you'd like to take a look. Nathan's eyes widened with genuine excitement before he caught himself glancing toward the hallway where his mother slept. I'd like that if Mother says it's okay. When Sophia joined them 20 minutes later, Frank noted how she'd attempted to cover the bruising with what little makeup she had. Her clothes, though wrinkled, were arranged with dignity, and she'd pulled her dark hair back neatly. She moved with the careful precision of someone managing pain. Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. I apologize for imposing on your hospitality. Frank's fine, and it's no imposition. He placed a cup of coffee before her. Figured you folks might need a place to catch your breath. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise perhaps at being so easily read, or relief at not having to explain. That's very kind, but we should be moving on soon. I wouldn't want to bring trouble to your door. Frank met her gaze steadily. Seems to me trouble's already found you, ma'am. Sometimes the best thing is to stand still long enough to see what's coming. Before Sophia could respond, the shop phone rang downstairs. Frank excused himself to answer it, leaving mother and son at the kitchen table. Reynolds Classic Auto, he answered, voice shifting to his business tone. Frank, it's Mike Collins. Mike, and the gravelly voice belonged to the local sheriff, a Vietnam veteran, and one of the few people Frank considered a friend. Got a situation you should know about. Had a call from Dallas PD this morning asking if we've seen a woman and child in the area, Sophia and Nathan Arlington. Missing persons. Frank's military training kicked in, keep your voice neutral, reveal nothing. That right? Any details? Husband's some big oil executive. Claims she's unstable, took the kid without permission. But something doesn't sit right. Guys pushing too hard, got private security making inquiries before the police report was even filed. Appreciate the heads up, Mike. You see anything, you call me, first understood, not Dallas, not state, me. Always do. Frank hung up mine, working through implications. Arlington like Arlington Oil. The company from the news last night, the pendant, the bruises, it was coming together. When he returned upstairs, Sophia was helping Nathan straighten the bedding in the spare room hospital corners in precise folds that spoke of exacting standards. Ms. Arlington, Frank said without preamble. That's your name, isn't it? She froze, one hand instinctively moving to her pendant, the other reaching for Nathan. How did you? Local sheriff's a friend. Dallas PD's looking for you and Nathan. Your husband's filed a missing persons report. Fear and resignation battled across her face. Then I suppose we should leave before they come here. I wouldn't want to involve you in our situation. Frank leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. Already involved, seems to me. Question is, what's the real situation? Because a woman with bruises like yours running with her child in the middle of the night that tells one story. A husband claiming his wife is unstable tells another. Sophia straightened, chin lifting with innate dignity. In which story do you believe, Mr. Reynolds? I believe in what I can see with my own eyes, and I've seen enough domestic cases to recognize the signs. He softened his tone. Look, I'm not asking for your life story, but if you're in trouble, running blind isn't the answer, especially not with a child. Nathan watched this exchange with that unsettling adult intensity, unconsciously shifting closer to his mother. After a long moment, Sophia exhaled. Victor will have people searching everywhere. Hotels, bus stations, rental cars. He has resources. Arlington Oil Resources. Frank nodded. Your husband's Victor Arlington, the CEO. Yes. She touched her pendant, again a seemingly unconscious gesture. Which means we've already put you at risk by being here. Victor doesn't tolerate interference in what he considers family matters. Frank assessed them both, the elegant woman with educated diction and hidden strength the solemn boy with watchful eyes. His life had been simple before they arrived. Quiet, predictable, just how he liked it after the chaos of war and the devastation of losing Janet. But some choices make themselves. "My apartment has a back entrance," he said finally. "Not visible from the road. Sheriff knows me well enough not to come looking without calling first. You can stay until you figure out your next move." Sophia stared at him, clearly trying to understand his motivation. "Why would you risk this for strangers?" Frank glanced at the photo of Janet, then at the shadow box of military medals. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when good people look the other way." Before Sophia could respond, the rumble of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Frank moved to the window with practiced caution, positioning himself to see without being seen. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past the garage, its driver clearly examining the building. "Down in the shop now," Frank ordered quietly. "Back office. Move." Years of military command left no room for argument in his tone. Sophia grabbed Nathan's hand, following Frank down the back stairs to the garage level. He led them to a small office behind the main workspace, closing the blinds with casual precision. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." Frank handed Sophia a business card. "If something happens, call this number. Ask for Sergeant Wilson. Tell him Sandstorm needs extraction. He'll understand." Sophia clutched the card, her composed facade cracking slightly. "Who are you, Mr. Reynolds?" "Just a mechanic, ma'am." Frank's smile didn't reach his eyes, who spent 8 years in places where noticing details kept people alive. Outside, Frank appeared to be simply opening his shop for the day, raising the garage door, turning on lights, moving around the Mustang he'd been working on. But his eyes tracked the SUV as it circled back, driving slower this time. As the vehicle passed, Frank casually retrieved a rag from the Mustang's hood, wiping his hands while memorizing the license plate. The SUV continued down Route 66, disappearing around a bend. Frank returned to the office, finding Nathan examining a model car collection on the shelf, while Sophia stood tense and ready by the door. Black suburban Texas plates. 2 men inside, one driver, one passenger. Passenger taking photos of the building. Frank's report was concise military. "They're looking but not certain, which means we have time." "Time for what?" Sophia asked. "To make a plan that doesn't involve running until you drop." Frank gestured to the chairs. "First, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Not everything, just enough to know what kind of threat we're facing." Sophia hesitated, then nodded toward Nathan. Understanding, Frank pulled a box from beneath his desk, model car kits he kept for customers' children. "Nathan, how'd you like to help me start on this '57 Chevy while your mom and I talk business? You can work right here at this table." The boy looked to his mother, who nodded permission. As Nathan became absorbed in organizing the small parts, Frank led Sophia to the main office, positioning himself where he could watch both the road and Nathan through the internal window. "I'm not what Victor claims," Sophia began without prompting. "I'm not mentally unstable. I'm a board-certified pediatrician who discovered something Arlington Oil doesn't want known." Frank leaned forward. "What kind of something?" "Cancer clusters. Unusual rates of childhood leukemia and respiratory conditions in communities near Arlington refineries." Her voice took on the precise tone of a medical professional. "I established a clinic in Port Arthur near our largest facility, started gathering data mapping cases against proximity to chemical releases." "And your husband didn't like that." "Victor doesn't tolerate anything that might impact quarterly earnings. When I presented my findings privately, he had my research confiscated and my clinic shut down for code violations. When I continued working from home, She gestured vaguely toward her face. "The bruises," Frank stated flatly. This wasn't the first time, but it was the first time Nathan tried to intervene. Her voice caught. "My 7-year-old son stood up to a grown man to protect me. That's when I knew we had to leave regardless of consequences." Frank processed this, glancing at Nathan through the window. The boy worked with methodical focus, organizing pieces by size before beginning the assembly, not typical child behavior. "The pendant you both wear, it's not Arlington Oil's logo." Sophia touched the silver derrick. "No, this was my father's company, originally Mitchell Energy. George Mitchell was a pioneer in responsible extraction techniques. He believed an oil company could be profitable without destroying communities." Her eyes hardened. When he merged with Arlington Petroleum, it was with guarantees that his ethical standards would continue. Victor dismantled those protections the moment my father died. And where do you fit in this corporate structure? According to my father's will, I own 51% of the merged company. She laughed bitterly. But Victor had me sign documents during our marriage transferring controlling interest to him. I was young in love and trusted the wrong person. The pieces were falling into place. So you're not just a wife running from abuse. You're a threat to his control of the company. If I could prove the original transfers were coerced or that Victor deliberately falsified safety data, she shrugged, it would end him, and he knows it. Frank nodded, understanding the stakes. This wasn't just domestic violence, though. That would have been reason enough. This was corporate power, billions of dollars, and a man willing to use both to maintain control. You need legal help and security. I have neither the money nor connections for either, not anymore. Victor made sure of that. Frank considered this, then reached for his phone. I might know someone who can help with the legal side. As for security, he glanced at his service photo on the wall. I still know a few people who remember how to keep watch. Before he could dial, the shop phone rang. Frank answered cautiously. Reynolds Classic Auto. Frank, it's Sarah. His sister's voice came through, professional as always. I'm on my way over. Don't let anyone leave. What's this about Sarah? He asked, keeping his tone neutral while watching Sophia. I just had the strangest conversation with a lawyer from Arlington Oil. They're one of our firm's biggest clients, and they're looking for the CEO's missing wife and son. They've hired our firm to handle the custody filing. A pause. Frank, they're tracking her phone. Last ping was near your shop late last night. Frank's mind raced. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. I'm breaking about 15 ethical rules by warning you, but something stinks about this whole situation. See you soon. Frank hung up and turned to Sophia. They tracked your phone. We need to move now. Alarm flashed across her face. I turned it off, removed the battery. Doesn't matter. They've got your general location. Frank moved to the back office where Nathan was carefully gluing pieces of the model car. Hey, buddy, we need to pack up. Going to show you something special, but we need to move quick, okay? To his credit, Nathan simply nodded immediately, organizing the model parts back into their container with that same methodical precision. Frank led them through the garage to a steel door at the back, unlocking it to reveal a small attached structure that had once been a storage shed. Inside sat a vehicle covered with a heavy tarp. If they're looking for runners, they'll watch bus stations, airports, rental agencies, Frank explained, pulling away the cover to reveal a pristine 1979 Jeep CJ7 lifted with oversized tires and desert tan paint. But nobody looks for this. Sophia stared at the vehicle. What is this, my desert rat? Frank patted the hood affectionately. Built her after I got back from the Gulf. Off-road, capable modified fuel tanks, blackout lights. She'll take you anywhere you need to go. You're giving us your car. Lending, Frank corrected, opening the driver's door. And I'm coming with you, at least until we get somewhere safe. Sophia's composure finally cracked. Why are you risking everything for people you just met? Frank paused, looking at Nathan, who watched them with those two serious eyes. Then at the bruises on Sophia's face, poorly concealed with makeup. Because 25 years ago in Kuwait, I saw what happens when people with power decide they can hurt whoever they want. His voice remained steady, but something dark flickered in his eyes. And I promised myself I'd never stand by and watch it happen again. Before Sophia could respond, the sound of tires on gravel alerted them to a vehicle pulling into the lot. Frank peered through a small window. It's my sister. She's alone. He turned to them. Sarah's a paralegal at Woodward and Price in Dallas. If anyone can help navigate the legal side of this, it's her. Sarah Reynolds entered through the main garage, her professional attire and sleek bob, a stark contrast to Frank's worn jeans and work shirt. At 45, she carried herself with the confident efficiency of someone who managed partners' schedules and knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. This is becoming a habit, Frank, she said by way of greeting. Collecting strays. Sarah, he warned. She softened, extending her hand to Sophia. Sarah Reynolds, and you must be Dr. Sophia Arlington. Your medical credentials are impressive, by the way. not the profile of someone having a mental breakdown. Sophia accepted the handshake, surprise evident. You've researched me. The moment I heard Arlington Oil was pushing a custody filing, something felt wrong. Sarah placed her briefcase on a workbench, all business. They're moving fast, emergency custody hearing already scheduled for tomorrow, claiming you're mentally unstable, a danger to your son. That's absurd, Sophia began, but Sarah held up a hand. Of course it is. But Victor Arlington donates to every judge's re-election campaign in Dallas County. They don't need truth, just plausibility. So what do we do? Frank asked. Sarah assessed them both. First, we document those bruises properly. Medical evidence. Second, we need to find your father's original will and the trust documents. If there's a question about your competence to transfer shares, we might have leverage. The will is with the family attorney, Sophia said, but he's been on Arlington Oil's payroll for years. He won't help us. Maybe not him, Sarah mused, but his files might. I know people who can get access discreetly. The sound of another vehicle approaching silenced them. Frank moved to the window, tension visible in his shoulders. Black Suburban, same one from earlier. They found us, Sophia whispered, reaching for Nathan. Not yet, they haven't. Frank's voice shifted, command presence, replacing the humble mechanic. Sarah, take them upstairs, back bedroom. Sophia, your phone, where is it? In my purse. Give it to Sarah. All of it, phone ID, credit cards, anything they could track. As Sarah ushered Sophia and Nathan toward the apartment stairs, Frank moved to the Jeep, retrieving something from beneath the seat, a small metal box with a combination lock. Inside was a 9mm Beretta M9 standard military issue, meticulously maintained. He checked the magazine, chambered around with practiced efficiency, then concealed the weapon in the small of his back. When he emerged into the main garage, he was once again just a mechanic wiping his hands on a shop rag as two men in expensive suits approached the open bay door. Help you gentlemen, Frank called, the picture of casual hospitality. The taller man stepped forward, observing the garage with barely concealed disdain. We're looking for a woman and child who might have passed through here. Family matter, husband's concerned about his wife's mental state. That right, Frank continued, wiping a wrench. His posture relaxed while his senses cataloged details. Both men carried weapons under their jackets. The shorter one had military bearing, private security, probably ex-military. The taller one was corporate, used to intimidation. Haven't seen any women or kids around here, Frank said. Just me and old Sarge. He nodded toward the German shepherd, who had materialized from the office, watching the visitors with alert suspicion. Mind if we look around? The taller man gestured toward the office. Her phone signal was traced to this area. Actually, I do mind. Frank's tone remained pleasant, but something in his eyes made both men reassess him. Got customers' property in here, privacy concerns. But if you'd like to come back with Sheriff Collins and a warrant, you're welcome anytime. The shorter man stepped forward, hand drifting toward his jacket. Listen, old man. Reynolds. A woman's voice cut through the tension. Sarah appeared from the side entrance, every inch the professional paralegal. These gentlemen bothering you? Not at all, sis. They were just leaving. Sarah approached, extending a business card. Sarah Reynolds, Woodward and Price. Is there something I can help you with? The taller man accepted the card, surprise evident. Woodward and Price represents Arlington Oil. Indeed we do, which is why I'm curious why Arlington Oil Security is harassing my brother instead of working through proper channels. She smiled thinly. I'd hate to have to explain this to the partners. The men exchanged glances, recalculating. We're looking for Sophia Arlington and her son. Family welfare check. Of course. And you have documentation of this welfare concern, court orders, police reports. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. Because entering private property without cause could constitute trespassing, not to mention the potential liability if Mr. Arlington's personal security were misidentified as intruders. The implied threat hung in the air. Frank maintained his casual stance, but his eyes never left the shorter man's right hand, still hovering near his concealed weapon. After a tense moment, the taller man nodded stiffly. We'll be in touch through official channels. Wise choice. Sarah's smile never reached her eyes. Good day, gentlemen. As they retreated to their SUV, Frank watched them through narrowed eyes. They'll be back. Of course they will, Sarah agreed, dropping her professional mask once the vehicle pulled away. But not immediately. They'll regroup, try to find legal leverage first. Which gives us time. Frank turned toward the stairs. Let's see what kind of plan we can put together. Upstairs, they found Sophia comforting Nathan, who sat rigid on the couch, his small hands clenched around his model car pieces. They're gone for now, Frank assured them, the Beretta now visible at his waistband. But we need to move quickly. Sophia stared at the weapon, then at Frank. You were military. Army, 7th Corps 1st Armored Division, Desert Storm. Frank didn't elaborate. It gives us some advantages they won't expect. Frank, they'll have her custody hearing fast-tracked, Sarah warned. Without counter-evidence of abuse and documentation of her mental competence, they could get temporary custody of Nathan within days. Sophia paled unconsciously, pulling Nathan closer. Then we get that evidence, Frank stated simply, and we find somewhere safe for them to stay while we build a case. I might know a place, Sarah said thoughtfully. Remember Tom Wilson from your unit? He retired to that ranch outside Weatherford. Remote defensible, and he owes you his life, if I recall correctly. Frank nodded. I'll call him. I'll need to document those bruises properly, Sarah told Sophia. And we need to find your father's original will. You said he was George Mitchell of Mitchell Energy. Yes, there should be a copy with his former assistant, Margaret Winters. She was like family, but I've lost contact with her since Victor took control. Sarah made notes. I'll find her, but first let's get you somewhere safe. As they prepared to leave, Frank took Nathan aside, kneeling to meet the boy at eye level. Nathan, I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that? The boy nodded solemnly. Mother says bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, even when you are scared. Your mother's a wise woman. Frank smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his tactical focus. I've got something for you. He retrieved a small box from a cabinet, opening it to reveal military medals and patches. This was my unit insignia from Desert Storm. When I was scared over there, it reminded me I wasn't alone. Nathan accepted the patch with reverence, tracing the embroidered tank and crossed sabers. You fought in a war. I did. Fixed tanks mainly made sure our guys could keep moving forward. Frank helped him tuck the patch into his pocket. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones no one sees. The ones fought for what's right, not just what's easy. The boy's serious expression lightened slightly. Like helping us? Exactly like that. Frank straightened, ruffling Nathan's hair the first time the boy didn't flinch at unexpected contact. Now let's go introduce you to my dessert rat. She's carried me through some tough spots. Bet she'll do the same for you. As Frank guided Nathan back to the garage, showing him the modified Jeep with its special features, Sophia watched from the doorway, something shifting in her expression. For the first time since they had arrived, tension eased from her shoulders, not from the promise of security or legal help, but from the simple sight of her son, engaged in a normal childhood moment, admiring a cool vehicle with a kind adult. He's good with Nathan, Sarah observed quietly. Yes, Sophia agreed, voice soft. It's been a long time since Nathan trusted a man. Victor made sure of that. Sarah studied her professionally. We're going to fix this, Dr. Arlington. My brother doesn't start fights he can't finish. Outside, the Texas sun broke through clouds, illuminating the garage as Frank helped Nathan into the Jeep's passenger seat, showing him how the roll bar worked, making the boy laugh for what might have been the first time in months. The sound carried to where Sophia stood, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. I hope you're right, she whispered, for all our sakes. The desert rat roared to life under Frank's practiced touch, its modified engine rumbling with barely contained power. As they pulled away from Reynolds' Classic Auto, Frank took a circuitous route, avoiding main roads and utilizing the network of farm-to-market backroads that crisscrossed rural Texas. In the passenger seat, Nathan watched the landscape change with solemn fascination, occasionally glancing back to check on his mother in the rear seat. We're taking the scenic route, Frank explained, catching the boy's eye, making sure we don't have company. Sarah followed in her sensible sedan, maintaining distance as they'd planned. Two vehicles traveling separately attracted less attention than a convoy. Frank had made 3 calls before departing, one to Mike Homlemoens, alerting him to visitors who might return to the shop, one to his old Army buddy Tom Wilson, arranging temporary sanctuary, and one to Rosie at the diner next door, asking her to keep an eye on Sarge and the place while he was gone. Mr. Reynolds, Nathan's voice was measured precise for a child his age. Are those men going to find us again? Frank considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. They might try, but I've spent a lot of years making sure people don't find me when I don't want to be found. Because of the war. Nathan fingered the unit patch in his pocket. Partly. Frank downshifted as they turned onto a rutted dirt road, the Jeep's suspension absorbing the rough terrain. After I came home, I needed quiet for a while. Space to figure things out. In the rearview mirror, he caught Sophia's gaze. She'd been silent since they left her composed exterior masking what Frank recognized as bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that came from months, maybe years of constant vigilance. We've got about 2 hours to Tom's place, he said, addressing them both. His ranch is off-grid solar power, well-water satellite phone. No digital footprint. Arlington's people won't find you there. And your friend can be trusted. Sophia's question held no accusation, only practical concern. Frank nodded. Tom Wilson was my tank commander in Desert Storm. We hit an Iraqi mine outside Kuwait City. Vehicle was disabled, fire spreading to the ammunition compartment. I pulled him out before the whole thing went up. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the implied heroism. He's had my back ever since. The Texas landscape rolled past, transitioning from the outskirts of Dallas to increasingly rural terrain. Spring wildflowers dotted the roadsides, bluebonnets, and Indian paintbrush, creating splashes of color against the green fields. In another context, it might have been a pleasant Sunday drive. Your sister, Sophia ventured after a long silence. She's taking significant professional risk by helping us. Sarah's always had a strong sense of right and wrong, sometimes to her detriment. Frank's mouth quirked in a half smile. Our dad was a Vietnam veteran mechanic too. Taught us both that you stand up for people who need it, regardless of consequences. Nathan had been watching a hawk circling overhead, but his attention snapped back at this. My grandfather said something similar, before he died. George Mitchell, Frank nodded. Your mother mentioned him. Sounds like he was a good man. The best, Sophia said softly, then hesitated. He would have liked you, Mr. Reynolds. Frank, he corrected gently. After sharing my spare room and escaping corporate thugs together, I think we can drop the formalities. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, transforming her face. Frank, then. They drove in companionable silence for several miles, the Jeep eating up the distance with steady determination. Frank maintained a vigilant watch, periodically checking their six, taking random turns to ensure they weren't being followed. Old habits from convoy security in Iraq, where predictable routes meant ambushes. Mother, Nathan said suddenly, pointing to a roadside historical marker. Look, it's about oil. Frank slowed, allowing them to read the weathered sign commemorating one of Texas's first major oil strikes in the 1930s. The discovery that had transformed the state's economy and birthed dynasties like the Mitchells and Arlingtons. My father used to take me to the original Mitchell wellhead, Sophia told Nathan. He said we should never forget where we came from, that the fortune we enjoyed came from the earth and the hard work of ordinary people. Sounds like wisdom, Frank commented, accelerating back to cruising speed. Too many forget their roots once they hit it big. Victor certainly did. Bitterness tinged Sophia's voice. His father was a roughneck who worked his way up, but Victor behaves as if the Arlingtons descended from royalty. Power does that to some folks, Frank observed. Saw it in the military too. Some officers forgot they weren't any different from the rest of us without those bars on their shoulders. The conversation lapsed again as they turned onto an even smaller road, this one barely more than twin ruts through scrubland. Sarah's sedan fell further behind, clearly struggling with terrain better suited to Frank's modified Jeep. Almost there, Frank assured them, navigating a dry creek bed with practiced ease. Tom's place is just over that ridge. As they crested the hill, Wilson Ranch came into view, a sprawling property nestled against the backdrop of mesquite and live oak. The main house, a modest ranch-style structure with a metal roof, sat back from the road, flanked by several outbuildings and corrals. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, and a windmill turned lazily in the afternoon breeze. A tall figure emerged from the house as they approached Tom Wilson, still military straight, despite his 60 years, his gray hair cropped short beneath a weathered Stetson. He watched their approach with the patient stillness of a man accustomed to waiting, one hand resting casually near the holstered sidearm at his hip. Frank pulled the Jeep to a stop in the graveled yard, dust settling around them. "Stay here a moment," he instructed, then stepped out to greet his old commander. The two men clasped hands, a simple gesture that conveyed decades of shared experience. "Reynolds," Tom nodded. "Been too long." "Appreciate this, Tom. After Kuwait, you could ask me to hide Jimmy Hoffa and I'd start digging." Tom's weathered face creased in a brief smile before his expression turned serious. "Got your message. Oil company exec's wife and kid needing sanctuary." "It's complicated," Frank admitted, "but they're good people in a bad situation." Tom assessed him silently, then nodded once. "Your word's always been enough for me." He turned toward the Jeep, where Sophia and Nathan waited. "Bring 'em in. Maddie's got lunch ready." Inside the ranch house, the atmosphere was unexpectedly warm. Madison Wilson, Tom's wife of 30 years, greeted them with the easy hospitality of a woman who'd spent decades welcoming her husband's military brothers. The interior was comfortable but practical, leather furniture designed for durability, walls adorned with Western art, and military memorabilia, a stone fireplace dominating the living area. "Y'all must be exhausted," Madison said, ushering them toward the kitchen where a simple meal awaited. "Eat first, details later." Sarah arrived shortly after, her sedan dusty from the rural roads. As they gathered around the kitchen table, Frank noted how Nathan stayed close to his mother, their shoulders touching, as if maintaining physical connection provided security. The boy's eyes, however, darted curiously to the military photos on the walls, lingering on an image of younger versions of Frank and Tom standing beside an M1 Abrams tank in the desert. "That was in Saudi before we moved into Iraq," Tom explained, following Nathan's gaze. "Your friend Frank here was the best mechanic in the 1st Armored. Could fix anything with wheels or tracks." Nathan glanced at Frank with newfound respect. "You fixed tanks. That was my job." Frank nodded. "Keep 'em rolling no matter what. Like cars, but bigger. Much bigger, and with a lot more firepower." Frank smiled slightly. "But the principles are the same. Find what's broken, figure out how to fix it with whatever you've got on hand." "Is that why you became a mechanic after the war?" The question, innocent but perceptive, caused a brief shadow to cross Frank's face. "Partly. It's good, honest work. You fix something, you can see the results right away. Simple." Sophia watched this exchange with quiet attention, noting the careful way Frank engaged with her son, never talking down to him, answering questions directly, but age appropriately. After lunch, while Madison showed Sophia and Nathan to their rooms, the adults convened in Tom's study, a small room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk covered with ranch paperwork. "So," Tom leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Sarah laid out the situation with crisp efficiency: Sophia's medical discoveries, the domestic abuse, Victor Arlington's corporate and political connections, and the emergency custody hearing scheduled for the following day. "Arlington Oil," Tom mused, "powerful enemies. Which is why we need somewhere secure for Sophia and Nathan while we build a legal strategy," Sarah explained. "If Victor gets temporary custody, we lose any leverage." "They can stay as long as needed," Tom assured them. "Ranch is remote defensible. I've still got connections with some of the boys from Delta who live nearby. Can set up a rotating watch if necessary." Frank nodded gratefully. Sophia mentioned her father's original will might provide legal leverage, something about the company shares being protected by a trust structure that Victor circumvented. "If we can find it," Sarah added, "and if we can prove the transfer of shares was coerced or that she was mentally compromised when signing. Proving domestic abuse after the fact is difficult." Tom noted the former military officer's mind working through tactical problems. "Unless she has documentation, medical records, police reports." Victor made sure there weren't any, Frank explained. "Man's careful, uses his wealth and connections to insulate himself." "But not careful enough," Sarah interjected. "He's moving too fast with this custody petition, creating a paper trail. And his security team showing up at your garage was sloppy, gives us witness testimony of intimidation tactics." A knock at the door interrupted them. Madison entered, her expression troubled. "Thought you should know the boy Nathan. He's having some kind of anxiety attack. Mother's with him, but it seems pretty bad." Frank was on his feet immediately following Madison to the guest room, where they found Nathan curled into a tight ball on the bed, breathing in short, panicked gasps while Sophia tried to calm him. "It's okay, sweetheart," she was saying, her doctor's training evident in her calm tone despite the worry in her eyes. "We're safe here. Remember your breathing. In through the nose, up through the mouth." Frank approached slowly, kneeling beside the bed to bring himself to Nathan's eye level. "Hey, buddy. Rough moment, huh?" Nathan's wide eyes found Frank's terror evident in their depths. "He'll find us," the boy managed between gasps. "He always does." "Your father?" Frank asked gently. Nathan nodded, his small body trembling. "I understand being scared," Frank said, his voice steady. "When I was in the desert, there were times I was terrified. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight." This caught Nathan's attention, slowing his breathing slightly. "Even you. Even me. Fear's normal when you're in danger. It's your body trying to keep you safe." Frank reached slowly into his pocket, withdrawing a small object, a tarnished challenge coin with his unit insignia. "My sergeant gave me this before my first mission. Said as long as I had it, I had the whole unit behind me. Wasn't ever really alone." He placed the coin in Nathan's palm, curling the boy's fingers around it. "You feel that solid metal. Real. When the fear gets big, hold onto something real. Feel its weight. Focus on that instead of the scary thoughts." Nathan clutched the coin, his breathing gradually steadying as he concentrated on the object in his hand. "That's it," Frank encouraged. "Now tell me 3 things you can see in this room." The coin," Nathan started. "The picture of horses on the wall, your hat on the chair." "Good. Now 2 things you can hear. Wind outside, clock ticking. 1 thing you can smell." Nathan took a deeper breath. "Leather, like your garage." "Perfect." Frank smiled approvingly. "That's called grounding. Brings you back to the present when your mind's running ahead to all the what-ifs." Sophia watched in amazement as her son's panic attack subsided under Frank's calm guidance. "Where did you learn that technique?" "VA counselor taught me after when it came home," Frank admitted. "Had my share of rough nights. Still do sometimes." Nathan's breathing had normalized, though he still clutched the challenge coin tightly. "Did your father hurt you too?" he asked suddenly with the direct innocence of childhood. The question caught Frank off guard. "No, son. My dad was a good man, but I saw things in the war that scared me, stayed with me after I came home. Like the monsters in dreams." "Something like that." Frank nodded. "The difference is we're going to make sure your monsters can't hurt you anymore. That's a promise." The simple declaration, delivered without embellishment, seemed to reassure Nathan more than elaborate assurances would have. He relaxed visibly, exhaustion replacing panic. "Why don't you rest a bit?" Sophia suggested, smoothing his hair. "I'll be right outside with Mr. Reynolds." Nathan nodded sleepily, the emotional exhaustion taking its toll. "Can I keep the coin?" "It's yours now," Frank confirmed. "Army tradition, pass it to someone who needs it more than you do." In the hallway outside, Sophia's composed facade crumbled momentarily. "Thank you," she whispered. "He hasn't had an attack that severe in weeks. The change in environment must have triggered it." "He's been through a lot," Frank observed. "But kids are resilient when they feel safe." "Are we, though, safe?" Sophia searched his face. "Victor has resources we can't imagine. Private security, political connections, unlimited funds." "Money and connections aren't everything," Frank replied. "I've seen outgunned, outmanned units hold position against overwhelming odds because they had something worth fighting for." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Your son in there, he's worth fighting for." Something passed between them in that moment, understanding, recognition, perhaps something more. Sophia had lived in a world of wealth and prestige, then terror and flight. Frank had known war loss and solitary existence. Yet somehow in this unlikely circumstance, they'd found common ground. The moment was interrupted by Sarah calling from the living room. "Frank, Sophia, you need to see this." They hurried back to find the others gathered around a television where a news program showed Victor Arlington at a press conference. Tall, distinguished in an impeccably tailored suit, he projected the image of a concerned husband and father rather than an abuser. "Deeply concerned for my wife's mental state." He was saying, his expression perfectly calibrated to convey worry rather than anger. "Sophia has been struggling with psychological issues since her father's death, and I fear she's having another episode. Taking our son from his home, his school, his stability, it's a cry for help. Sophia went rigid beside Frank, her hands clenching into fists. On screen, Victor continued his performance. I'm not angry. I just want my wife to get the treatment that she needs, and my son returned to his home where he belongs. If anyone has information, please contact the authorities. Sophia, if you're watching this, please come home. Let us help you. Sarah muted the television, her expression grim. He's controlling the narrative, creating public sympathy while painting you as unstable. Classic abuser tactic, Tom noted. Discredit the victim, present yourself as the reasonable party. Sophia's voice when she spoke contained cold fury. He's using the same strategy he used when I presented my research on the cancer clusters. Called me emotionally compromised by my medical work, suggested I was seeing patterns that didn't exist. We need to counter this, Sarah said. Get your side out there. No, Frank interjected, surprising them. That's what he wants, to flush you out, force you to defend yourself publicly. Right now, our advantage is that he doesn't know exactly where you are or who's helping you. He turned to Sophia. Tell me about these cancer clusters. You have documentation. She nodded. Everything was on my laptop, which Victor confiscated, but I kept backups on an encrypted drive hidden in Nathan's teddy bear. She glanced toward the guest room. I never told Victor about it. That's our leverage, Frank realized. Hard evidence of corporate malfeasance tied to your father's original intent for the company. But we still need the will and trust documents, Sarah pointed out. Margaret Winters might have copies, Sophia said. She was more than my father's assistant. She was practically family. After the merger, Victor forced her into early retirement, but she and my father had contingency plans. He never fully trusted the Arlingtons. Smart man, Tom commented. Sarah made notes on her legal pad. I'll locate Margaret Winters. But first we need to counter this custody petition. The hearing's tomorrow, and we need documentation of the abuse medical evaluation showing you're mentally competent and character witnesses. I can handle the medical evaluation, Madison offered unexpectedly. Before retiring to the ranch, I was a clinical psychologist with the VA. My license is still active, and my assessment would be admissible. Tom nodded proudly at his wife's contribution. And I can reach out to some of our friends in law enforcement, get statements about Arlington's security team operating outside their jurisdiction. What about the bruises? Frank asked Sophia gently. We need to document them properly. She touched her cheek self-consciously. They're fading already. Even faded bruises can be photographed with the right lighting, Madison assured her, and I can testify to their consistency with offensive rather than accidental trauma. As they continued planning, Frank noticed Sophia's increasing exhaustion, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she blinked to maintain focus. Despite her education and professional accomplishments, she was running on empty after months of hypervigilance and fear. We can continue this later, he suggested quietly. You should rest while Nathan's sleeping. To his surprise, she didn't argue another sign of her exhaustion. As Madison led her to lie down, Sarah turned to Frank with raised eyebrows. I've never seen you take to strangers like this, she observed once they were alone. Not since Janet. Frank didn't respond immediately, moving to the window to scan the landscape, an automatic security check that had become second nature. They needed help, he finally said. Simple as that. Sarah knew her brother too well to accept the oversimplification. Is it that they represent something you've been missing? A purpose beyond oil changes and carburetor rebuilds. Frank's jaw tightened. Don't psychoanalyze me, Sarah. Someone needs to. Her tone softened. You've been hiding in that garage since Janet died. 10 years of existing, not living. Before Frank could respond, his cell phone vibrated a text from Mike Collins' black Suburban back at shop. 2 men searching premises. Called them off with threat of trespassing charges. They're escalating. They're at the garage, Frank reported, showing Sarah the message. Looking for evidence of where we've gone. They won't find anything, Sarah assured him. We were careful. Frank wasn't so certain. Maybe, but these aren't amateurs we're dealing with. Arlington's got resources, connections. He turned to Tom. How secure is your property? Perimeter's alarmed, Tom replied. Motion sensors on the access road, cameras on the main house. But it's a ranch, not Fort Knox. Given enough manpower and determination, anyone can get in. Then we need a fallback position. Frank's military training took over analyzing terrain and resources. And we need to accelerate our timeline. Sarah checked her watch. I should head back to Dallas, start locating Margaret Winters, and preparing for tomorrow's hearing. Take my truck, Tom offered. Less conspicuous than your sedan out here. And Madison should go with you. We'll need her professional testimony at the hearing. As they finalized plans, Frank stepped outside, scanning the horizon with ingrained vigilance. The Texas landscape stretched before him, peaceful in the late afternoon light. But experience had taught him that tranquility could be deceptive. In the desert, the most dangerous moments often came after periods of calm. His phone vibrated again, another text from Mike. Check email. Sent something you need to see. Frank retrieved his laptop from the Jeep, connecting to Tom's satellite internet. Mike's email contained a single video file captured by the security camera Frank had installed at the rear of his garage. The footage showed the two men from Arlington Oil searching the premises, but it was the third figure that caught Frank's attention, a tall, elegant man in an expensive suit directing the operation with imperious gestures. Victor Arlington had come personally to hunt for his wife and son. Frank downloaded the video evidence of trespassing, an illegal search, then continued watching as Arlington examined the apartment above the garage. The man's expression, captured clearly when he faced the hidden camera, contained none of the concern he'd displayed at the press conference. Instead, his features were twisted with cold fury as he rifled through Frank's personal belongings. In one chilling moment, Arlington picked up the photo of Janet from Frank's nightstand, studied it, then deliberately placed it face down with contemptuous precision. A wave of anger surged through Frank, not the hot, impulsive kind, but the cold, focused rage he'd known in combat. This wasn't just about helping strangers anymore. Arlington had made it personal. When he returned inside, his expression must have betrayed his thoughts, because Tom asked immediately, "What happened?" "Arlington's at my garage, searching the place himself." Frank's voice remained calm, controlled. "Mike sent video footage." Sarah frowned. "That's good for us legally, evidence of harassment and trespassing." "It's more than that," Frank corrected. "It shows he's personally involved, not just sending minions. He's getting desperate, which makes him dangerous." Tom concluded, the former tank commander assessing threat levels. "If he's willing to risk being identified at your place, he's escalating beyond legal channels." Frank nodded grimly. "We need to move up our timeline. Sarah, instead of heading back to Dallas tonight, we should contact Margaret Winters immediately. If she has the original will and trust documents, that's our best leverage." "I can make calls from here," Sarah agreed, "but eventually we'll need to appear in court for the custody hearing." "One step at a time," Frank advised. "First, secure the documentation that proves Sophia's rightful control of the company. That gives us bargaining power." As they worked through contingency plans, a small sound from the hallway caught Frank's attention. Nathan stood there in sock feet, the challenge coin still clutched in his hand, watching the adults with solemn eyes. "Hey, buddy," Frank greeted him gently. "Feeling better?" Nathan nodded, then asked with direct simplicity, "Is my father coming here?" The adults exchanged glances, silently debating how much to share with the child. Frank made the decision, approaching Nathan and kneeling to his level. "He's looking for you and your mom," he admitted honestly, "but he doesn't know where you are, and we're going to keep it that way." "He always finds us," Nathan said matter-of-factly. "He found us in Austin at the hotel, and in San Antonio at grandmother's friend's house." Frank considered this. Those were places he might think to look. "This ranch belongs to my friend, someone your father doesn't know exists. That gives us an advantage." Nathan processed this with the serious consideration of a much older person. "But we can't stay here forever." "No," Frank agreed. "But we don't need forever. Just long enough to find some important papers that will help your mom." "My grandfather's will," Nathan stated, surprising the adults. "Mother told me about it. Father made her sign papers, but grandfather had a plan to protect us." Frank exchanged glances with Sarah, impressed by the child's awareness. "That's right. Your grandfather was a smart man." "He was," Nathan agreed solemnly. "Father didn't like him, said he was weak because he cared about people more than money." The simple statement revealed volumes about Victor Arlington's character and the environment Nathan had been raised in. "What do you think?" Frank asked. "About caring for people versus money?" Nathan considered this with surprising thoughtfulness. "Grandfather said money is just a tool, like a wrench. It's useful, but it's how you use it that matters." Frank smiled. "Your grandfather sounds like my kind of person." A soft sound from the doorway drew their attention. Sophia stood there watching this exchange with a complex expression, gratitude, sorrow, and something harder to define. "He would have adored you, Frank Reynolds," she said quietly. "A practical man who understands what truly matters." Before Frank could respond, Sarah's phone chimed. Her expression shifted as she read the message. "I found Margaret Winters. She's in a retirement community in Fredericksburg about 3 hours from here." "Is she willing to help?" Sophia asked, hope edging her voice. "More than willing. She says she's been waiting for you to contact her." Sarah looked up from her phone. "She has documents in a safe deposit box, your father's original, will the trust structure documents, and something she called insurance against the Arlingtons." "Insurance?" Tom raised an eyebrow. She wouldn't specify over the phone, but said George Mitchell never trusted Victor Arlington and took precautions before the merger. Hope and determination warred on Sophia's face. "We need those documents before the custody hearing." "Fredericksburg is closer than Dallas," Frank noted. "If we leave at first light, we could retrieve the documents and still make the hearing." "Arlington's people will be watching the courthouse," Tom warned. "Which is why Sophia and Nathan should stay here while I go with Sarah to meet Margaret," Frank decided. "Less risk of being recognized." "No," Sophia's voice was firm. "Margaret was like family to me. She won't hand over those documents to strangers no matter how well-intentioned. I need to go." "And where Mother goes, I go," Nathan added with surprising firmness, moving to stand beside Sophia. Frank recognized the determination in both their expressions, the same steel he'd seen in soldiers who'd reached their limit of retreating. Sometimes the only way forward was through. "All right," he conceded, "but we do this carefully. Tom, can you arrange for some of your Delta friends to keep watch here while we're gone, and in case Arlington's people somehow track us to the ranch?" Tom nodded. "Already made those calls. 2 will be here within the hour, 2 more on standby." "Sarah and I will take the Jeep," Frank continued. "Better for rural roads if we need alternate routes. Madison should stay here less conspicuous if fewer vehicles are moving." As they finalized plans for the morning departure, Frank noticed Nathan fighting to stay awake, the emotional exhaustion of the day catching up with him. Sophia guided him back to the guest room, murmuring quiet reassurances as they went. Later after dinner, Frank found her sitting alone on the porch, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. He settled into the adjoining rocking chair, the wood creaking comfortably beneath his weight. For several minutes, they sat in companionable silence, the evening chorus of cicadas, providing natural background music. Finally, Sophia spoke. "Nathan's never taken to anyone the way he has to you," she observed. "Not since before the abuse started." Frank nodded, accepting the observation without comment. "Victor was charming at first." She continued, her voice distant. "Attentive, supportive of my medical career. I was completing my residency when we met, exhausted, vulnerable, after my father's illness. He seemed like a safe harbor." "They usually do," Frank said quietly. "Predators are good at spotting the perfect moment to strike." Sophia glanced at him sharply. "You sound like you've seen it before." "Not personally, but in the military you learn to recognize patterns." Frank rocked slowly, his eyes on the darkening horizon. Strong personalities targeting the vulnerable. Power dynamics shifting gradually until the victim is isolated, dependent. "That's exactly what happened," Sophia admitted. "After we married, Victor insisted I take a less demanding position at the hospital. Then suggested I focus on our family foundation instead of clinical work. Each step seemed reasonable at the time, each compromise small enough to accept. Until they weren't. Until they weren't, she agreed. The final straw was my research into the cancer clusters near Arlington refineries. Children dying of rare cancers at statistically impossible rates. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't pretend not to see the pattern." Frank studied her profile in the fading light, her straight posture, the elegant line of her jaw, the determination evident despite her exhaustion. "You're a doctor to your core," he observed, "not just by training, but by nature." She smiled faintly. "My father used to say the same thing. Even as a child, I was always trying to fix whatever was hurt: birds with broken wings, neighborhood pets, eventually people. And now you're trying to fix a broken company," Frank added. "Return it to what your father intended." "Is that foolish?" Sophia turned to face him fully. "To think I could stand against someone like Victor with all his power and connections?" Frank considered the question seriously. I once watched a single Iraqi civilian stand in front of a column of tanks refusing to let them enter his village. One man against all that armor and firepower. What happened to him? Our commander ordered us to stop, to find another route. Frank's expression softened with the memory. Sometimes the moral authority of one person standing firm for what's right is stronger than all the power and weapons in the world. Is that what you believe we're doing? Standing for what's right. I believe your son deserves to grow up without fear, Frank said simply. I believe children near those refineries deserve to live without cancer. I believe your father's vision for ethical business shouldn't be destroyed by greed. He paused. And I believe some fights choose you whether you want them or not. Sophia studied him in the gathering darkness. You're a surprising man, Frank Reynolds. Not what I expected to find in a rural Texas auto shop. Life takes some unexpected turns, he acknowledged with a slight smile. 10 years ago, I never imagined I'd be sitting on a porch with a pediatrician heiress planning to outmaneuver an oil tycoon. And I never imagined finding safety with a mechanic who quotes philosophy and teaches my son grounding techniques for anxiety. Sophia's smile reached her eyes for perhaps the first time since they'd met. Yet here we are. Here we are, Frank agreed. The moment stretched between them comfortable and fraught with possibility. Finally, Frank stood, his practical nature reasserting itself. We should get some rest. Early start tomorrow. Sophia nodded, rising gracefully. Thank you, Frank. Not just for the sanctuary or the plan, but for treating Nathan with such respect. He's been the man of the house for too long, trying to protect me when it should have been the other way around. He's a remarkable kid, Frank said sincerely. Smart, observant, resilient. You've done well by him despite everything. I hope so. Uncertainty crept into her voice. I keep wondering if I should have left sooner, if I exposed him to too much before finding the courage to run. You left, Frank stated firmly. That's what matters. Some never find that courage. As they turned to go inside, a faint sound caught Frank's attention, the distant hum of an engine too faint for casual ears, but distinct to someone trained to recognize approaching vehicles in combat zones. Get inside, he ordered quietly, all warmth vanishing from his voice as he shifted into tactical mode. Tell Tom we might have company. Sophia didn't question him, immediately moving to alert the others, while Frank melted into the darkness of the porch, positioning himself to observe without being seen. Years of military training took over, controlling his breathing, remaining perfectly still, becoming one with the shadows. The sound grew louder, resolving into the distinctive engine note of a high-performance vehicle moving at speed down the rural access road. Headlights appeared in the distance, bouncing over the uneven terrain. Inside, he heard Tom's quiet commands, the ranch house preparing for potential threat with military efficiency. Madison ushering Sophia and Nathan to the interior safe room, Sarah gathering the documentation they'd prepared, Tom retrieving weapons from a secured cabinet. Frank waited patient as the desert predators he'd observed during long nights on watch in Iraq. The approaching vehicle slowed as it neared the ranch entrance, its headlights cutting through the Texas night. Not a Suburban? A sleek European sedan moving cautiously now as it approached the main house. Frank's hand moved to the small of his back where the Beretta rested in its holster. The sedan stopped at the security gate, its engine idling. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and a figure emerged, tall, elegantly dressed despite the rural setting. Even in the dim light, Frank recognized the distinctive bearing of wealth and privilege. But this wasn't Victor Arlington. The newcomer's build was slighter, his movements less commanding. The figure approached the gate, then called out in a cultured voice that carried clearly through the night air. I know you're watching. I'm not here to cause trouble. My name is Maxwell Arlington. I'm Victor's brother, and I've come to help Sophia. Frank remained motionless, evaluating the claim. Maxwell Arlington, the younger brother, less prominent in company affairs according to Sarah's research. What game was the Arlington family playing now? I'm alone, Maxwell continued. Victor doesn't know I'm here, but he knows you've taken Sophia to a rural property outside Dallas. His security team is narrowing the search perimeter. You don't have much time. Tom materialized beside Frank, a shotgun held casually but ready. Could be a trap, he murmured. Draw us out, get us to reveal positions. Frank nodded slightly. Or he could be telling the truth. Either way, we can't leave him at the gate announcing our location to anyone passing by. Your call, Tom deferred. You've got the most at stake here. Frank considered their options, then made a decision. Cover me from the house. If anything seems off, don't hesitate. With that, he moved silently off the porch and through the darkness, approaching the gate from an angle that would give him tactical advantage. The Beretta remained concealed but accessible as he closed the distance to Maxwell Arlington. That's far enough, Frank called when he was within speaking distance, but still partially sheltered by a large oak tree. State your business. Maxwell turned toward his voice, squinting into the darkness. Are you the mechanic, the one helping Sophia and Nathan? What do you want? Frank countered, neither confirming nor denying. To warn you, Maxwell replied, and to help if you'll let me. Victor's become dangerous more than usual. He's not just using legal channels anymore. He's hired people, professionals. Why would you betray your own brother? Frank remained skeptical. Maxwell's laugh held no humor. Because he stopped being my brother a long time ago. Because I've watched him destroy everything our father and George Mitchell built. Because he's willing to hurt a child, his own son, to maintain control. From the shadows of the porch, Tom's voice carried quietly. Frank, Sophia's asking to speak with him. Frank hesitated, weighing risks against potential benefits. If this is a trick, you won't leave this ranch, he warned Maxwell. That's not a threat, it's a promise. I understand. Maxwell held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. I've made my choice. For once in my life, I'm choosing the right side instead of the profitable one. Frank approached cautiously, conducting a thorough search for weapons or recording devices before leading Maxwell toward the house where Tom waited with the shotgun still at ready. Inside, Sophia stood in the living room doorway, Nathan half hidden behind her, his small face a mask of wariness. Her expression when she saw Maxwell contained complex emotions, suspicion, hope, and residual fear. Maxwell, she acknowledged coolly, this is unexpected. Sophia, he remained by the door, respecting the invisible boundary between them. I know you have no reason to trust me. I've stood by too long, said nothing while Victor, he faltered. There's no excuse for my silence. But I'm here now because he's crossed a line even I can't ignore. What line? Sophia's voice remained controlled, professional. The doctor assessing a dubious claim. He's hired people to find you, not just private investigators, specialists, ex-military contractors. Maxwell's gaze shifted to Frank, the kind who don't care about legal niceties. Frank and Tom exchanged glances, the implication clear. Mercenaries, not bound by law enforcement constraints. How did you find us? Frank demanded. I followed you from your garage, Maxwell admitted. But immediately I waited until Victor's security team left, then picked up your trail. I've always been better at tracking than my brother gives me credit for. If you found us, others can too, Tom noted grimly. Not necessarily. I knew what to look for. A mechanic helping Sophia would likely have connections outside the city. I researched Frank Reynolds, found his military record, identified likely associates in rural areas. Maxwell's explanation demonstrated both intelligence and determination. Victor's people are still focused on official channels, hotels, transportation hubs, credit card transactions. Why now? Sophia asked the most pertinent question. You've watched Victor's behavior for years without intervening. Maxwell's composure cracked slightly. Because of what I found in his office safe. Medical reports on your father's decline. Toxicology results that were never submitted to the coroner. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implication settled. Are you saying Victor poisoned my father? Sophia's voice barely rose above a whisper. Not directly, but he ensured George was exposed to chemicals that accelerated his pulmonary condition. Compounds from one of the refineries, the same facility your research identified as the source of the childhood cancer cluster. Nathan moved closer to his mother, sensing her distress. Frank found himself unconsciously stepping nearer as well, providing silent support. I need proof, Sophia stated flatly. Not accusations. I brought what I could safely remove. Maxwell reached slowly into his jacket, mindful of Tom's watchful stance with the shotgun. He withdrew a thumb drive. Copy of the toxicology report and something else, financial transfers to the trustees of your father's estate dated days before they resigned and allowed Victor to take control of your shares. Sarah moved forward, her legal mind engaging. Bribery and potentially murder. That changes everything. It also makes Victor more dangerous, Frank pointed out. A man who'd poison his father-in-law and bribe trustees won't hesitate at further violence to protect himself. Maxwell nodded agreement, which is why I'm here. The custody hearing tomorrow is a trap. Victor has no intention of allowing legal proceedings to determine Nathan's future. The hearing is just a way to flush you out, get you to a predictable location. We need those documents from Margaret Winters more than ever, Frank concluded. Original will trust structure and whatever insurance George Mitchell left behind. I can help with that, Maxwell offered. Victor doesn't know about my involvement yet. I can move more freely, less likely to be recognized than Sophia. The adults exchanged wary glances, silently debating the wisdom of trusting this unexpected ally. Nathan, however, approached Maxwell with characteristic directness. Did you know my grandfather was being poisoned? The boy asked, his young voice steady despite the horrific subject. Maxwell knelt to Nathan's level, echoing Frank's earlier approach. No, Nathan. If I had, I would have stopped it. I loved your grandfather. He was a better man than anyone in my family. Nathan studied him with that unsettling adult intensity. Mother says people show who they really are by their actions, not their words. Your mother is very wise, Maxwell acknowledged. I can only hope my actions now will begin to make amends for my previous inaction. The boy seemed to consider this, then nodded once decision made with the simple clarity of childhood. He turned to Frank. I think he's telling the truth. His eyes looked sad, not scary like father's. Frank found himself valuing the child's assessment more than he might have expected. Children often perceived emotional authenticity that adults missed, particularly children like Nathan, who'd learned to read adult moods as a survival mechanism. All right, Frank decided. We adjust the plan. Maxwell, you'll come with Sarah and me to meet Margaret Winters tomorrow. Sophia and Nathan remain here with Tom and Madison where it's secure. I still need to attend the custody hearing, Sophia protested. Not if it's a trap, Frank countered. We file for a continuance present evidence of threat to explain your absence. Sarah nodded agreement. I can handle that part. Judge Williams is fair. She'll understand security concerns if properly presented. As they reworked their strategy incorporating Maxwell's information and assistance, Frank observed the complex dynamics at play. Trust cautiously extended, alliances forming through necessity, the disparate group mechanic, doctor, lawyer, rancher, corporate executive finding common purpose against a shared threat. Outside the Texas night, deepened stars emerging in brilliant clarity away from city lights. Inside maps were spread across Tom's dining table, routes planned and contingencies discussed with military precision. Maxwell provided insider knowledge of Victor's resources and likely tactics. Sarah outlined legal strategies for multiple scenarios. Madison prepared documentation of Sophia's mental competence and Nathan's well-being. Through it all, Frank watched Nathan, who refused to go to bed despite the late hour. The boy sat quietly at the table's edge, still clutching the challenge coin, absorbing every word with solemn attention. Not just a child being protected, but a participant in his own rescue. When the planning finally concluded near midnight, the adults dispersed to snatch a few hours of rest before the pre-dawn departure. Frank found himself alone with Nathan in the kitchen, the boy helping him prepare a thermos of coffee for the journey. Mr. Reynolds, Nathan said as he carefully measured coffee grounds. Are you scared? The direct question deserved an honest answer. A little, Frank admitted. Being scared keeps you sharp, helps you prepare better. Nathan nodded, accepting this perspective. I'm scared too, but not like before. He looked up, his young face serious in the kitchen's soft light. Before I was scared all the time, even when Father wasn't angry. Now I'm just scared of what might happen, not of everything. That's progress, Frank assured him. Big difference between specific fears and general anxiety. Did you feel like that after the war? Frank paused, surprised by the perceptiveness of the question. Yes, he answered finally. For a long time after coming home, I was on an edge, constantly expecting danger everywhere. What helped? Time, structure, finding purpose, it's simple things. Frank gestured around them. Making coffee, fixing engines, building something that works. Nathan considered this wisdom with characteristic gravity. Like the model car, we started creating order from separate pieces. Exactly like that. Frank smiled, touched by the boy's insight. When we get through this, we'll finish that model together. Maybe start a whole collection. I'd like that, Nathan said softly, then added with unexpected vulnerability, if we get through this. Frank placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. We will. That's another promise. Nathan looked up at him with absolute trust, a responsibility Frank felt with physical weight. This child had known too little stability, too few reliable adults. The promise was one Frank intended to keep, regardless of cost. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing a change in weather, a cool front moving across the Texas plains. Inside, a mechanic and a child prepared a coffee for the journey ahead, bound by circumstances neither could have imagined and trust neither had expected to find. Morning would bring new challenges and dangers. But for this moment in the quiet kitchen of a Texas ranch, they found simple purpose in measuring coffee grounds and warming water, building order from chaos one small step at a time. Dawn broke over the Texas landscape in bands of gold and crimson, the vast sky gradually revealing itself as Frank Reynolds performed his final equipment check. The Desert Rat stood ready, freshly fueled and loaded with essential supplies. Beside it, Maxwell Arlington's luxury sedan looked comically out of place on the ranch's dusty ground, like a thoroughbred horse in a cattle pen. Two-vehicle convoy, Frank explained to the assembled group on Tom Wilson's porch. Maxwell and Sarah in the sedan leading. They're less likely to attract attention in small towns. I'll follow in the Jeep, maintaining visual contact but keeping distance. Tom nodded approval at the tactical arrangement. Communications. Frank held up a set of handheld radios. These have better range than cell phones in rural areas, and they can't be tracked or monitored as easily. The plan was straightforward. Frank, Sarah, and Maxwell would drive to Fredericksburg to meet Margaret Winters and retrieve the crucial documents. Meanwhile, Sophia and Nathan would remain at the ranch under Tom and Madison's protection, along with two of Tom's former Delta Force teammates who had arrived during the night, silent, watchful men who moved with the easy confidence of experienced operators. Remember, Frank continued, we're not looking for confrontation. Get in, secure the documents, get out. If Arlington's people appear, we disengage and use alternate routes back to the ranch. Sarah checked her watch. Margaret's expecting us at 10. That gives us 3 hours to make a 2-hour drive time for evasive routing if necessary. Frank turned to Sophia, who stood on the porch with Nathan close at her side. The morning light softened her features, making her appear younger, more vulnerable. Yet her posture remained composed, dignified, despite the circumstances. We'll be back by nightfall, he assured her. Stay inside, follow Tom's security protocols. Be careful, she replied quietly. Victor's resources are substantial. Frank nodded, acknowledging the warning. So are ours, just different kinds. As the adults finalized preparations, Nathan approached Frank, the challenge coin visible in his small hand. Mr. Reynolds, he said with characteristic seriousness, I think you should take this back. For luck. Frank knelt to the boy's level, touched by the gesture. That's very thoughtful, buddy. But the coin belongs to you now. Army tradition. But you're going into danger, Nathan persisted, like a mission. Frank smiled slightly. I've been on plenty of missions without that coin. Besides, he lowered his voice conspiratorially, I've got something even better. He pulled a small object from his pocket, a worn brass valve stem cap from a 1967 Mustang. This was the first part I ever fixed on my dad's car. Carried it through Desert Storm, and every day since. Nathan examined it with solemn appreciation. A talisman. Exactly. Reminds me that even the smallest parts matter in keeping the whole machine running. The boy nodded in understanding the metaphor with that preternatural maturity that continued to surprise Frank. We're all parts of the same machine now. That's right. Frank straightened, ruffling Nathan's hair, a gesture the boy no longer flinched from. You take care of your mom while I'm gone. That's your mission. Yes, sir. Nathan's response carried the crispness of a junior officer receiving orders. As Frank turned to leave, Sophia stepped forward. Without warning, she embraced him briefly but fiercely. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. The unexpected contact left Frank momentarily at a loss for words. He nodded once, squeezing her shoulder reassuringly before turning toward the vehicles. Let's move out, he directed Sarah and Maxwell. Daylight's burning. The small convoy pulled away from the ranch dust, trailing behind them as they navigated the rutted access road. In the Jeep's rearview mirror, Frank watched the figures on the porch grow smaller. Sophia's straight posture, Nathan's small form beside her, Tom's vigilant stance. People who had been strangers days ago now central to his purpose. Once they reached the main highway, Maxwell's sedan took the lead as planned, maintaining a steady pace while Frank followed at a discreet distance. The Texas hill country unfurled around them, rolling terrain covered with oak and mesquite, wildflowers still blooming along the roadsides, cattle grazing in distant pastures. Peaceful, deceptively so. Frank's military instincts remained on high alert, scanning oncoming traffic, noting vehicles that maintained pace behind them for too long, watching for patterns that didn't fit the normal flow of rural traffic. The radio crackled occasionally with Sarah's voice reporting all clear from their position. 90 minutes into the journey as they approached a small town, Sarah's voice came through with increased urgency. "Frank, we've got company. Black Suburban coming up fast behind you." Frank checked his mirrors immediately, spotting the vehicle tinted windows, antenna configuration, suggesting communications equipment moving with purposeful speed. "Confirmed visual," he responded calmly. "Continue as planned. I'll create distance." The town ahead provided opportunities, side streets, civilian traffic, public spaces where confrontation would be risky for Arlington's security team. Frank reduced speed, allowing the Suburban to close the gap, then abruptly turned onto a commercial street lined with small businesses. The Suburban followed. "Definite tail," Frank reported. "Proceed to the meeting point. I'll divert and rejoin when clear." Sarah acknowledged her sedan, continuing toward Fredericksburg, while Frank implemented evasive driving techniques, random turns, doubling back, varying speeds. The Suburban stayed with him, professional and persistent. Two men Frank noted through his mirrors. Driver and passenger, both with military-style haircuts. Not local law enforcement, private security, likely ex-military contractors, as Maxwell had warned. Outside a busy diner, Frank made his move. He parked the Jeep, prominently entered the establishment, then immediately exited through the kitchen, nodding apologetically to the startled staff as he passed through. A service alley led to a parallel street where he quickly ducked into a hardware store. Through the window, he watched the Suburban's occupants enter the diner, scanning for their quarry. Frank used the moment to call Sarah on a secure line. "I've got two tails occupied in town," he reported. "How's your position?" "Clear so far," she responded. "We're 20 minutes from Margaret's retirement community. Maxwell says the entrance has security gates, sign-in procedures." "Good. Proceed as planned. I'll shake these guys and rejoin you." "Be careful, Frank. These aren't amateurs." "Neither am I," he reminded her, then ended the call. Using the hardware store's rear exit, Frank circled back to his Jeep through a series of alleys and side streets. The Suburban remained parked outside the diner, its occupants still searching inside. He started the Jeep and pulled away casually, blending with the local traffic before accelerating once clear of the town center. 15 minutes later, having confirmed no pursuit, Frank took an alternate route toward Fredericksburg. The radio remained silent, good protocol from Sarah, minimizing transmissions, now that they knew Arlington's team was in the area. Frank's mind worked through the implications. If security contractors were tracking them, Victor Arlington was escalating beyond legal channels. The custody hearing was indeed likely a trap designed to draw Sophia into the open. Their decision to have her remain at the ranch had been correct. But how had the security team found them? Their departure from the ranch had been early, their route indirect. Frank considered the possibilities: tracking devices, communications intercepts, informants. The most concerning option was a leak within their small group, but Frank dismissed it. He'd served with Tom Wilson, trusted him with his life. Maxwell remained a question mark, but his cooperation so far seemed genuine, his information accurate. More likely, Arlington's resources were simply vast enough to cast a wide net. Security teams deployed throughout the region, watching major roads, perhaps monitoring police bands and traffic cameras. Fredericksburg appeared ahead, a picturesque German-influenced town, popular with tourists. The Sunset Ridge retirement community sat on its outskirts, a sprawling complex of Spanish-style buildings surrounded by manicured gardens. Frank approached cautiously, parking a block away to observe before entering. Maxwell's sedan was visible in the visitor's lot. No Suburban, no obvious surveillance. After a final security scan, Frank proceeded to the main entrance where a cheerful receptionist greeted him. "I'm here to meet Sarah Reynolds and Maxwell Arlington," he explained. "They're visiting Margaret Winters." "Of course, they arrived about 15 minutes ago." She indicated a sign-in sheet. "Your name, sir?" "Frank Reynolds." Any relation to Sarah? She asked conversationally as she prepared a visitor badge. My sister, Frank confirmed, maintaining the friendly small talk while his eyes continuously scanned the lobby. How nice Ms. Winters is in Cottage 14. Just follow the path through the garden. The family reunion sounds lovely. She's been quite excited about it. Frank thanked her and moved through the complex, appreciating the security protocols while noting their limitations. The community was designed for safety, but not against determined professionals. Cottage 14 stood slightly apart from others, fronted by a small garden of native Texas plants. Frank Knox softly identified himself and was admitted by Sarah. Inside the cottage was modest but elegantly appointed, comfortable furniture shelves lined with books, walls displaying photographs of oil derricks alongside family portraits. Seated in a high-backed chair was Margaret Winters, a petite woman in her 70s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes that missed nothing. "So, you're the mechanic," she stated without preamble, assessing Frank with a directness that reminded him of Nathan. "Sarah's been telling me about your assistance to Sophia and the boy." "Yes, ma'am." Frank remained standing, positioning himself near the window where he could monitor the approach to the cottage. "Former military," she observed. "Desert Storm," Sarah mentioned. "George would have approved. He always said character matters more than credentials." "George Mitchell sounds like a wise man," Frank acknowledged. "The wisest I knew, and the most far-sighted." Margaret gestured to a locked briefcase beside her chair. "Which is why we're here today." Sarah and Maxwell sat on a nearby sofa, a pot of tea between them on the coffee table. The formality of the scene tea service in fine china cups stood in stark contrast to the urgency of their mission. "Ms. Winters," Frank began, "I appreciate your willingness to help, but we should move quickly. Arlington's security contractors are in the area." Margaret nodded, unsurprised. Victor's always preferred brute force to intellectual solutions. She lifted a small key from a chain around her neck. "These documents are George's legacy, his true legacy, not the corrupted version Victor has created." She unlocked the briefcase, revealing meticulously organized folders. The original will and trust documents establishing Sophia's controlling interest. The merger agreement with all protective covenants intact. And most importantly, she withdrew a sealed envelope, George's insurance policy. "What exactly is this insurance?" Sarah asked, legal mind engaged. Before the merger, George commissioned an independent environmental assessment of all Arlington petroleum facilities. He wasn't satisfied with the internal reports Victor's father presented. Margaret's voice carried the precise memory of a lifelong executive assistant. The findings were concerning: systematic violations, falsified safety records, containment failures that were never reported to regulatory authorities. The cancer clusters Sophia was researching, Frank realized. Yes, George knew was gathering evidence before his illness accelerated. Margaret's eyes hardened. An illness that progressed far more rapidly than his doctors had predicted. Maxwell leaned forward. "You suspected Victor was involved even then." "George did," Margaret confirmed. "He couldn't prove it, but he created this fail-safe documentation that would transfer controlling interest back to Sophia if evidence of criminal negligence ever emerged." Sarah examined the legal documents with professional appreciation. "This override clause is brilliantly constructed. If Victor violated specific ethical standards laid out in the merger agreement, all shares transferred under duress revert to Sophia's control. And the environmental assessment provides that evidence," Margaret concluded. "Along with these," she produced another folder. "Financial records showing Victor systematically dismantled safety protocols to increase profits after gaining control. Maintenance schedules, altered inspection reports, falsified whistleblowers' silence through termination and non-disclosure agreements." Frank absorbed this information, understanding now why Victor Arlington was willing to resort to extra-legal measures. This wasn't just about an abused wife seeking safety. It was about corporate control worth billions, criminal liability, possibly murder charges. "We need to get these documents to a secure location," he stated, "and we need multiple copies stored separately." Sarah nodded agreement. "I can file for an emergency injunction based on these findings, prevent Victor from making any major corporate decisions while the ownership dispute is resolved." "You'll need to move quickly," Margaret warned. "Victor's been liquidating assets, transferring funds offshore. George's old financial advisor at Merrill Lynch contacted me last week concerned about unusual movement of capital." Maxwell frowned. He's preparing to abandon ship if necessary. Classic Victor, always an escape route. Frank checked his watch. We should move. Security team may have regrouped by now. As they gathered the documents, Margaret touched Frank's arm. A moment, please. The others moved toward the door, giving them privacy. Sophia was like a daughter to me, Margaret said quietly. When Victor isolated her, cut her off from everyone who cared about her, I felt I'd failed George's trust. Her eyes sharp with intelligence despite her age assessed Frank thoroughly. Sarah tells me you have taken considerable personal risk for Sophia and Nathan. Seemed like the right thing to do, Frank replied simply. Margaret smiled. George would have said the same thing. He believed the true measure of wealth was what you did with it, how you used resources to improve lives rather than merely accumulate more. Sounds like a rare perspective in the oil business. Increasingly so, Margaret sighed. Before you go, there's something else you should know. Something not in those documents. She lowered her voice further. George suspected Victor was responsible for a refinery accident in Port Arthur that killed 3 workers. Safety protocols that should have prevented the disaster had been deliberately disabled to save costs. Frank processed this information grimly. How many more people has he hurt for profit? Too many, Margaret confirmed, which is why this fight matters beyond just Sophia and Nathan's safety. It's about justice for everyone Victor has harmed in his pursuit of power. The weight of this additional responsibility settled on Frank's shoulders, not unwelcome, but sobering. What had begun as sheltering a woman and child from abuse had expanded into a confrontation with corporate criminality that affected countless lives. We'll see it through, he promised. Margaret studied him, then nodded with satisfaction. I believe you will, Mr. Reynolds. Outside, Frank conducted another security sweep before they departed Sarah and Maxwell, and in the sedan with the original documents, Frank in the Jeep with photocopies Margaret had prepared. They would take separate routes back to the ranch, minimizing risk of losing everything if one vehicle was intercepted. As they pulled away from Sunset Ridge, Frank's radio crackled. Frank, this is Tom. Do you copy? The unexpected communication raised immediate concern. Protocol had been minimal radio contact unless the emergency. Copy, Tom. Go ahead. We've got a situation. 2 unmarked helicopters circled the ranch about 20 minutes ago. Now we've got vehicles approaching from the access road. Professional operators moving tactically. Frank's military instincts surged to full alert. Sophia and Nathan. Secure in the safe room with Madison. My Delta boys are deployed around the perimeter. But Frank, these aren't just security contractors. They're moving like a tactical team with the coordination and equipment to match. Mercenaries, as Maxwell had warned, Victor Arlington had escalated beyond private security to paramilitary force. Hold position, Frank ordered. We're 3 hours out with the documents. I'll contact local law enforcement. Already tried, Tom responded grimly. Sheriff's Department reports all units tied up with a multi-vehicle accident on the highway. Convenient timing. Frank processed this tactical mind, working through options. Can you maintain perimeter defense for 3 hours? Affirmative, but these guys aren't amateurs. They're probing for weaknesses, setting up containment positions. Understood. We're coming in hot. Maintain radio silence unless critical. Reynolds out. Frank immediately signaled Sarah's sedan pulling alongside at the next turnout. He explained the situation in rapid, precise terms. We need to split up, he concluded. Sarah, take the documents directly to Judge Williams. With this evidence, she can issue warrants for Victor's arrest, freeze corporate assets. What about Sophia and Nathan? Sarah asked, concern evident. Maxwell and I will head back to the ranch. If Arlington's mercenaries are there, we need firepower and tactical experience. Maxwell spoke up. I should come with you. I know how Victor thinks how his security teams operate. Frank assessed him briefly, then nodded. Transfer to the Jeep. Sarah, take the sedan, alternate routes, no stops. If you encounter surveillance, drive directly to the nearest state police barracks. As they quickly redistributed personnel and supplies, Frank made another call to Mike Collins, explaining the situation in terse, specific language that the former Vietnam veteran would understand. Sounds like a private army operating on U.S. soil, Mike observed grimly. That's federal territory. No time for jurisdictional debates, Frank replied. I need backup at these coordinates. He provided the ranch's location. Armed civilians, potential hostage situation. I'll call to some friends at the Texas Rangers, Mike promised, and I'll come myself, 2 hours minimum. We'll hold till then. As they terminated the call, Maxwell joined Frank in the Jeep, his expensive suit incongruous against the vehicle's rugged interior. You realize Victor has crossed into serious criminal territory, Maxwell observed as they accelerated back toward the ranch. Deploying armed personnel against private citizens, that's beyond corporate hardball. He's desperate, Frank replied, pushing the desert rat to its mechanical limits. Your brother lost control of the narrative when Sophia escaped. Now he's losing control of his company with these documents. Desperate men make dangerous choices. He's not just my brother anymore, Maxwell said quietly. He's a criminal who happens to share my DNA. There's a difference. Frank glanced at him briefly, noting the resolve in his expression. Perhaps Maxwell Arlington was finding his own redemption in this conflict, choosing principles over family loyalty. The Texas landscape blurred past as Frank maintained maximum safe speed, taking back roads and rural routes that would be less monitored than highways. His military training had included evasive driving and rapid response deployment skills he'd never expected to use again in civilian life. 90 minutes from the ranch, Frank's phone vibrated with a text from Sarah Documents, delivered to Judge Williams. Emergency injunction granted, arrest warrant issued for Victor Arlington. The legal system is finally moving, Frank informed Maxwell, but that won't stop what's happening at the ranch. If anything, it might accelerate Victor's desperation. Maxwell nodded grimly. He won't go quietly, not with everything he's built at stake. No, Frank agreed. Men like your brother don't surrender power willingly. As they approached the outer perimeter of Tom's property, Frank killed the Jeep's headlights and reduced speed, navigating by moonlight and memory. He pulled off the access road a mile from the main house, concealing the vehicle in a stand of mesquite. From here we move on foot, he instructed, retrieving a backpack containing essential equipment, night vision monocular, handheld radio, first aid kit, and the Beretta with extra magazines. Maxwell followed Frank's lead as they proceeded through the underbrush, moving with the careful silence of hunters. Despite his corporate background, Maxwell showed unexpected fieldcraft, placing his feet, carefully maintaining noise discipline, following Frank's hand signals. Half a mile from the house, Frank detected the first signs of the mercenary team: fresh tire tracks on a rarely used fire road, discarded water bottles, communication wire running through brush. Professional, but not infallible. Through the night vision monocular, the tactical situation became clear. 4 vehicles positioned strategically around the ranch house. Men in dark clothing moving with military precision, establishing perimeter positions. Frank counted at least 8 operators, possibly more, inside vehicles or structures. Tom's outnumbered, he whispered to Maxwell, but he's got the defensive advantage, knowledge of terrain, prepared positions, Delta Force training. Frank activated his radio on the preset frequency, transmitting in coded bursts to avoid detection. Sandstorm approaching from southeast. 2 personnel. Status report. After a brief pause, Tom's voice responded, equally cryptic. Perimeter holding, 8 tangos confirmed. No breach attempts yet. Package secure in basement. Package Sophia and Nathan. Basement, the ranch's reinforced safe room. Still secure for now. Rangers inbound ETA 60 minutes, Frank informed him. We'll create diversion from southeast corner, draw attention from main entrance. Copy that. We'll be ready. Frank turned to Maxwell. I need to know, are you prepared to engage these men, potentially with lethal force? Maxwell's expression was grim but determined. To protect Sophia and Nathan from my brother's mercenaries, absolutely. Follow my lead. Stay low. Move only when I signal. Frank checked his weapon. We're not looking to be heroes. Just need to disrupt their containment until law enforcement arrives. They advanced through the darkness using natural cover and terrain features. Frank's combat experience guided their approach: indirect, unpredictable, targeting the operational weaknesses of the mercenary deployment. Their first move targeted the mercenaries' communications. Frank identified a relay station set up near the perimeter, a portable transmission unit with directional antennas. Using a small canister of lubricant from his pack, he systematically disabled the equipment's cooling fans, ensuring it would overheat with continued use. Next, they located an unattended vehicle, a tactical SUV, positioned for quick extraction. Frank silently disabled its ignition system, removing essential components and pocketing them. creating uncertainty, he explained softly to Maxwell, degrading their operational confidence. Their activities hadn't gone unnoticed. Radio chatter increased among the mercenary team, with perimeter guards reporting equipment failures. Two operators moved to investigate the communications breakdown, drawing them away from the main containment positions. Frank and Maxwell used this opportunity to advance closer to the ranch house, eventually reaching an equipment shed that provided both cover and observation position. From here, they could see the full deployment the mercenaries had established, textbook containment with overlapping fields of fire and mutual support positions. "Tom's maintaining disciplined defense," Frank observed. "No shots fired, no direct confrontation. Smart." "What's Victor's play here?" Maxwell wondered. "He can't just make Sophia and Nathan disappear." "Too many people know about the situation now." "Control the narrative," Frank suggested. "Get physical custody of Nathan, take him out of the country perhaps. Deal with legal consequences later from a position of safety." Maxwell nodded grimly. "That fits his pattern. Victor always believes rules apply to others, not to him." A sudden increase in radio traffic caught Frank's attention. Through the night vision, he observed new movement at the mercenary command vehicle. A tall figure emerged, expensively dressed, despite the rural setting and operational circumstances. "Is that?" Maxwell began. "Victor," Frank confirmed. "Your brother's here personally." This changed the tactical situation significantly. Victor Arlington's presence suggested imminent action rather than continued containment. Frank adjusted his assessment accordingly. "We need to disrupt their timeline," he decided. "Force them to delay whatever they're planning until law enforcement arrives." Using natural cover, they circled toward the mercenary command vehicle, where Victor now stood issuing instructions to his team leader. Frank couldn't hear the conversation, but the increased activity following it suggested escalation. "They're preparing to breach," he realized, observing operators checking weapons and equipment. "We're out of time for subtle approach." Frank reached into his pack, retrieving road flares, simple but effective tools for creating diversion. He handed two to Maxwell with brief instructions, then moved to a position where he could observe the ranch house's main entrance, now the focus of mercenary attention. On Frank's signal, Maxwell ignited the flares and tossed them toward the parked vehicles on the perimeter. Simultaneously, Frank activated the ranch's irrigation system, using the emergency override code Tom had provided, suddenly spraying water across the carefully planned approach routes. The combination of bright flares and unexpected irrigation created momentary confusion among the mercenary team. Victor Arlington's voice carried through the night, demanding immediate action despite the disruption. Frank used the distraction to reach the ranch's power distribution box, where he implemented the second phase of disruption, a controlled power surge followed by selective outage, plunging the exterior lighting into darkness while maintaining power to the house's interior and security systems. The mercenaries, professional but now facing unexpected complications, regrouped with visible frustration. Their night vision equipment calibrated for consistent lighting conditions required adjustment after the sudden changes. In the command vehicle, Victor Arlington's patience clearly frayed. Even from a distance, his fury was evident as he berated the team leader, gesturing emphatically toward the house. Frank's radio crackled softly. "Diversion effective," Tom reported. "They're resetting perimeter. But Frank, they've brought breaching equipment. Heavy stuff. Rangers ETA. 40 minutes minimum." Frank assessed their options. The diversionary tactics had bought time, but not enough. With breaching equipment, the mercenary team could access the ranch house within minutes once they reorganized. A more direct intervention was necessary. "Maxwell," Frank whispered, "can you get close enough to speak to your brother, distract him, while I reposition?" Maxwell considered this. "He'll be suspicious, but yes, he won't expect me here. We'll tell him about the legal developments, the injunction, the arrest warrant. Keep him talking as long as possible." While Maxwell circled toward the command vehicle, Frank moved to establish a position near the house where he could potentially intercept the breaching team. The night had grown unusually quiet, the mercenaries maintaining radio discipline, the ranch house dark and seemingly abandoned, except for security lights illuminating the interior. From his new vantage point, Frank observed Maxwell approach the command area, hands visible to avoid being mistaken for a threat. Victor's reaction was immediate and violent, gesturing angrily, advancing on his brother with unmistakable fury. Frank couldn't hear the exchange, but Maxwell's body language remained calm. reasonable, continuing to engage Victor despite his evident rage. The distraction worked. The mercenary team leader paused the breaching preparation, awaiting new instructions as the Arlington brothers confronted each other. Using this opportunity, Frank advanced to the ranch house's rear entrance, where Tom had left an access point secured but available for friendly forces. Once inside, he moved silently through the familiar layout to the main living area where he found Tom and one of his Delta teammates positioned defensively. Situation, Frank asked tersely. Holding pattern, Tom reported. They've made 3 probing attempts testing our response without committing fully. Maxwell's buying us time out there. Sophia and Nathan. Secure in the safe room with Madison and Jenkins. Communications established adequate supplies for extended containment. Frank nodded, tactical mind working through scenarios. Victor's getting desperate. He knows law enforcement is coming, but he's committed now. As if confirming his assessment, increased activity outside signaled the mercenary team resuming operations. Maxwell's diversion had apparently reached its limit. They're moving, Tom observed through a carefully positioned mirror. Breaching team approaching main entrance. Frank made a quick decision. I'm going to the safe room. When they breach, fall back to secondary positions as planned. Delay, don't engage directly unless necessary. Tom nodded, understanding. These were professionals facing them mercenaries with military training and equipment. Direct confrontation would endanger everyone, especially with Sophia and Nathan in the house. Frank moved quickly to the basement level where the reinforced safe room had been constructed within a former wine cellar. Using the authentication code, he gained access to find Sophia, Nathan, Madison, and Jenkins waiting tensely. Sophia's relief at seeing him was palpable. Frank. She moved toward him immediately. We heard explosions, then the power fluctuated. Diversionary tactics, he explained quickly. Law enforcement is coming, but Arlington's team is moving to breach the house. Nathan stood straight, the challenge coin visible in his hand. Despite the danger, the boy's composure remained remarkable. Are we going to fight? He asked directly. No, buddy. We're going to outsmart them. Frank turned to Jenkins, the Delta operator providing close protection. Status of the secondary exit. Prepped and ready, Jenkins confirmed. Vehicle positioned as planned. Frank nodded approval. Tom's ranch, like many remote Texas properties owned by security-conscious veterans, had been designed with contingencies in mind, including a concealed exit tunnel from the safe room, leading to an underground garage with emergency vehicle. Madison, I need you and Jenkins to take Sophia and Nathan through the secondary exit, Frank instructed. Head directly to the rendezvous point we established. Sarah will meet you there with the legal team. What about you? Sophia asked, concern evident. Tom and I will maintain presence here, make Victor believe you're still in the safe room. Frank checked his watch. Rangers should arrive within 30 minutes. We just need to extend the timeline. Above them, the unmistakable sound of the front door being breached reverberated through the structure. Time was running short. Go now, Frank directed. Jenkins knows the road. Sophia hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced Frank briefly but fiercely. Be careful, she whispered. Please. Always am, he assured her with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Nathan approached next, his small face serious. Like in the war, he said, you're covering our retreat. Frank knelt to the boy's level. Exactly like that. Your job is to protect your mom now. Okay, that's your mission. Yes, sir. Nathan's response carried that same crispness Frank had noted earlier, a child playing at soldier yet understanding the seriousness beneath the game. As Madison and Jenkins prepared to lead them through the secondary exit, Frank returned upstairs to rejoin Tom. The mercenary team had breached the main entrance and was proceeding with textbook precision, clearing rooms, systematically maintaining tactical formation. From their fallback position, Frank and Tom observed without engaging and allowing the mercenaries to penetrate deeper into the house while believing they were encountering only minimal resistance. They're heading for the basement, Tom noted, looking for the safe room. Let them find it, Frank replied. By the time they breach it, our package will be well clear. Outside vehicle engines started the secondary exit plan, executing successfully. The sound drew immediate attention from the mercenary team leader, who directed half his force to investigate while continuing the push toward the basement. Through his observation position, Frank spotted Victor Arlington entering the house behind his security team, face contorted with determination and rage. The corporate executive had abandoned all pretense of legitimacy, now personally directing an armed assault on private property. "Victor's inside," Frank reported. "Time to implement final delay." Tom nodded understanding. They had prepared multiple fallback positions, each rigged with non-lethal deterrents, smoke generators, noise devices, and obstacles designed to slow progress without causing permanent harm. As the mercenary team approached the basement stairs, Tom activated the first sequence. Smoke filled the stairwell, obscuring visibility. Simultaneously, high-intensity strobes activated, disrupting night vision equipment and natural sight adaptation. The mercenaries hesitated, professional discipline, warring with unexpected complications. "Rangers ETA 15 minutes. Tom reported, checking his communications device. "Mike Collins is with them, providing situational briefing. "We just need to keep Victor contained until they arrive," Frank noted. "Once law enforcement takes control, his operation falls apart." But Victor Arlington had not built a corporate empire by accepting defeat. Through the smoke and tactical confusion, his voice carried with unexpected authority. "Reynolds," he called out, "I know you're there. The mechanic playing hero." Frank remained silent, exchanging glances with Tom. Better to maintain operational security than engage. "I'm not leaving without my son," Victor continued. "You've interfered in a family matter, turned my wife against me, poisoned my brother's loyalty. But this ends now." Still, Frank maintained silence, monitoring the mercenary team's positions as they regrouped, adapting to the defensive measures. "I can make this worth your while," Victor offered, voice shifting to negotiation. "Name your price. Everyone has one." Tom raised an eyebrow at Frank, who shook his head slightly. No engagement, no negotiation. Victor's patience expired quickly. "Fine, have it your way." His voice hardened. "When my men find you, there won't be anything left for the authorities to identify. Just another tragic accident on a remote ranch." The threat revealed Victor's true nature, the corporate facade completely abandoned, now revealing the ruthless predator beneath. Frank had encountered similar personalities in combat zones, men who believed their wealth or power placed them above consequences, above morality itself. "Two can play at psychological operations," Frank murmured to Tom. Then, keying his radio to an open frequency the mercenaries would monitor, he spoke clearly. "Arlington, this property is now surrounded by Texas Rangers and federal agents. Your mercenaries are operating illegally on U.S. soil. That's federal prison time. Your corporate assets have been frozen by judicial order. The evidence of your criminal activities has been delivered to authorities." He paused, letting this sink in. "But you still have one option: surrender peacefully." Silence followed his transmission. Then Victor's laugh, cold, dismissive. "Nice try, Reynolds. If law enforcement were here, they'd have announced themselves." As if on cue, powerful spotlights suddenly illuminated the ranch house exterior from multiple directions. A voice amplified by a loudspeaker carried clearly. "This is Captain James Garrison, Texas Rangers. The property is surrounded. All armed personnel are ordered to lay down weapons and exit the building with hands visible." And the timing couldn't have been better if they'd rehearsed it. Frank allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction as confusion erupted among the mercenary team professionals, suddenly realizing they faced legitimate law enforcement rather than private opposition. Victor's voice rose in desperate command. "Hold positions. They're bluffing." But his authority was crumbling. The mercenary team leader, facing potential federal charges, made the pragmatic decision: stand down, weapons safe. Outside, law enforcement vehicles established a perimeter, their lights painting the night in red and blue strobes. Mike Collins' voice came through Frank's radio on their private channel. "Frank, you still in one piece in there?" "Affirmative," he responded. "Two friendlies in the northeast corner, second floor. Hostiles concentrating in main hall and basement stairs." "Roger that. We're proceeding with caution. Rangers tactical team entering through main breach point." Frank and Tom maintained their defensive position, watching as the mercenary team progressively surrendered to the advancing Rangers. Professional to the end, they followed protocols for armed surrender weapons, down hands visible, compliance with commands. Victor Arlington, however, was not among them. "Victor's mobile," Frank reported, spotting a movement through his observation point. "Heading toward a rear of house." "Attempting escape," Tom concluded. "Secondary exit through kitchen leads to staff parking area." Frank made a quick decision. "I'm intercepting. Maintain your position." Moving silently through the ranch house's familiar layout, Frank circled to cut off Victor's escape route. He found the corporate executive in the kitchen, frantically searching for an exit, while his mercenary team surrendered in the main hall. "It's over, Arlington," Frank stated flatly, blocking the rear door. Victor spun toward him, fury and desperation warring on his aristocratic features. "You," he spat, "the mechanic? Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do to you even after this?" "I know exactly who you are," Frank replied calmly. "A man who poisoned his father-in-law, who abused his wife and terrorized his son, who falsified safety reports and let people die from toxic exposure to increase quarterly profits." Victor's expression shifted, calculation replacing rage. "Allegations, unproven. I have lawyers' political connections. This incident will be explained away, a misunderstanding, overzealous security contractors exceeding their instructions." "Not this time." Frank stood firm, blocking the exit. "Your brother provided evidence. Margaret Winters preserved the original documents. The environmental assessments, the toxicology reports, the financial records showing bribery of trustees, it's all with the authorities now." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victor's face. "Maxwell," he whispered. "My own brother. He chose right over loyalty," Frank said simply. "Something you might want to consider." Victor's hand moved suddenly toward his jacket. Frank reacted with combat-honed reflexes, closing the distance before Victor could retrieve whatever weapon he carried. A brief struggle ensued, Victor fighting with the desperate strength of a cornered predator. Frank responding with controlled, precise techniques learned in military training. It ended quickly. Victor Arlington, for all his wealth and power, was no match for a combat veteran who'd maintained his physical conditioning through years of mechanical work. Frank secured him in a restraint hold just as Texas Rangers entered the kitchen, weapons ready. "Victor Arlington," Captain Garrison announced formally, "you're under arrest for multiple charges, including criminal trespass, attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, and deployment of armed personnel for illegal purposes." He nodded approval to Frank. "We'll take him from here, Mr. Reynolds." As the Ranger secured Victor, reading him his rights with methodical precision, Frank stepped back, the adrenaline of combat slowly receding. Outside, law enforcement had established complete control of the property, processing the mercenary team members and securing their equipment. Frank's phone vibrated with a text from Sarah Package, secure at rendezvous point. All safe. Relief washed through him. Sophia and Nathan had escaped the confrontation entirely exactly as planned. The legal process was in motion, Victor in custody, evidence secured. It was over. Or nearly so. 3 days later, Frank stood in his garage, the familiar sense of motor oil and metal polish surrounding him like old friends. The cherry-red 1967 Mustang Fastback gleamed under the overhead lights, restoration complete and ready for delivery to its owner. Sarge lounged in his customary spot near the office door, occasionally lifting his head to observe Frank's methodical work cleaning tools and restoring order to his workspace. The German Shepherd had seemed confused by his master's extended absence, but quickly readapted to their routine upon Frank's return. The shop phone rang, breaking the comfortable silence. "Reynolds Classic Auto." Frank answered, his voice returning to its professional cadence. "Frank, it's Sarah." His sister sounded energized, professionally satisfied. "Thought you'd want an update. Judge Williams has frozen all Arlington oil assets pending full investigation. Victor's being held without bail flight risk, given his offshore accounts and multiple international properties. And Sophia's claim to the company, looking solid. The original trust documents were exactly as Margaret described, ironclad protection of Sophia's controlling interest, with specific ethical covenants that Victor clearly violated. Her legal team expects full restoration of her rights within weeks." Frank nodded, satisfaction warming him. "Good. She'll return the company to what her father intended. She's already announced plans to restart her pediatric clinic near the Port Arthur refinery," Sarah continued, "and initiated a health monitoring program for communities near all Arlington facilities." "And Nathan?" Sarah's voice softened. "He's doing well. The trauma specialist says his resilience is remarkable. Having stable, trustworthy adults in his life again has made all the difference." After completing the call, Frank returned to organizing his workspace, mind processing all that had transpired. The shop felt both familiar and strange after the intense events of the past week, like returning from deployment to civilian life. the transition jarring despite the comfort of routine. The sound of tires on gravel drew his attention. Through the open garage door, he watched a modest SUV pull into the lot, not the luxury vehicle he might have expected, but practical, unassuming transportation. Sophia stepped out dressed simply in jeans and a light sweater, rather than the expensive attire she'd worn when they first met. Nathan emerged from the passenger side, immediately scanning the surroundings before breaking into a genuine smile at the sight of Frank in the garage doorway. "Mr. Reynolds," the boy approached with newfound confidence, the challenge coin visible in his hand. "We came to return your Jeep." "No rush on that," Frank replied, ruffling Nathan's hair in what had become a familiar gesture. "How are you doing, buddy?" "Want better," Nathan answered with characteristic directness. "The nightmares are less frequent. Dr. Madison says that's progress." Sophia approached more slowly, her expression complex: gratitude, uncertainty, and something deeper Frank couldn't quite name. "Frank," she greeted him softly, "I hope we're not interrupting your work." "Never too busy for friends," he assured her, the word feeling simultaneously inadequate and profound. Sarge padded out to greet them, receiving enthusiastic attention from Nathan, who knelt to embrace the German shepherd. The boy's interaction with the dog revealed his healing, more childlike, less guarded than when they'd first met. "We wanted to thank you properly," Sophia explained. "Everything happened so quickly after the ranch. The rangers, the legal proceedings, the media attention." "No thanks necessary," Frank assured her. "You did the hard part long before I came into the picture, finding the courage to leave, to protect Nathan, to start over." Nevertheless, she stepped closer, her composure momentarily wavering. "What you did, risking your safety, your business, your peaceful life, that deserves acknowledgement." Frank shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "Did what anyone would do." "No," Sophia corrected gently. "Most people wouldn't have opened their door that night, let alone everything that followed." "You're an exceptional man, Frank Reynolds." Before he could formulate a response, Nathan rejoined them, holding something carefully in his hands. The model car they'd started together, now completed with painstaking detail. "I finished it," the boy announced proudly. "Every piece, just like you showed me." Frank examined the model with appropriate seriousness. "Outstanding workmanship, Nathan. Professional quality." The boy beamed at the praise. "Father Victor never saw anything I made. Said it was childish nonsense." His expression darkened briefly, then cleared. "But Mother says making things with your hands is important work." "Your mother's right," Frank agreed, meeting Sophia's eyes over Nathan's head. "Building things that last, that's what matters." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken by Nathan's direct question. "Are we staying in Texas?" Sophia hesitated. "For now, yes. The legal proceedings will take time, and I want to restart my clinic work here." She glanced at Frank. "We found a house to rent in town. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable. Close enough that Nathan could visit the garage sometimes, if that's acceptable." The question carried more weight than its surface, meaning not just permission for garage visits, but tentative exploration of continued connection. "More than acceptable," Frank replied, something warm unfurling in his chest. "This place could use some young energy. Been just me and Sarge too long." Nathan's expression brightened. "Could you teach me more about engines, real ones, not just models?" "Absolutely. Every mechanic needs an apprentice." Frank smiled, the expression coming more naturally than it had in years. "And I happen to have a 1963 Corvette Stingray that needs restoration. Perfect learning project." As Nathan eagerly began asking technical questions about the Corvette, Sophia moved closer to Frank, her voice low and private. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "The board of directors has voted to rename the company Mitchell Arlington Energy, returning to my father's original vision of sustainable extraction and community responsibility." "He'd be proud," Frank observed. "Yes." She touched her pendant, the oil derrick that represented her heritage. "The company will establish a foundation to research childhood cancers related to environmental exposure and fund medical clinics in communities affected by our operations." "Turning things around," Frank nodded approval. "Using resources for healing instead of harm." "Exactly." Sophia's expression grew thoughtful. "My father used to say wealth was just a tool, like a wrench. Its value depends entirely on how you use it." Frank smiled, remembering Nathan's similar words at the ranch. "Smart family, you Mitchells." Their conversation was interrupted by Nathan's excited call from inside the garage, where he discovered Frank's collection of model cars and military memorabilia. "We should probably rescue your display cases." Sophia laughed, the sound lighter than Frank had heard before healing, like her son. As they moved together toward the garage, Frank felt something shift within him, the solitary patterns of his post-war, post-Janet life realigning to accommodate new possibilities. Not replacement of what was lost, but addition of something unexpected and valuable. Outside, the Texas sun illuminated Route 66 in golden afternoon light, casting long shadows across the garage's weathered Reynolds Classic Auto Repairs and Restoration. Inside, a boy explored a new world of mechanical wonders, while his mother and a mechanic watched with shared appreciation, not just of the child's enthusiasm, but of the unexpected connections that had brought them to this moment. Lifelike engines sometimes required unexpected parts to function properly. Frank Reynolds, mechanic and veteran, had spent years maintaining machines while keeping his own life in neutral. Now watching Sophia and Nathan bring new energy to his carefully ordered world, he felt himself shifting into gear again, moving forward, purpose restored. Some restoration projects, Frank reflected as he joined them among the tools and treasures of his life's work, proved more valuable than others. And some broken things, when carefully tended by skilled hands, didn't just return to function, they emerged stronger at the mended places, more resilient for having been repaired.